What's good, everyone? This is Wonder Harry, and boy do we have a treat for you. What if Sirius Black appealed to ancient Black family law and legally claimed Harry before Dumbledore could stop him? Hit subscribe and the bell. Let the story begin. Chapter 1. The claim the night Sirius Black escaped Azkaban, most of the wizarding world assumed he ran. They imagined him sprinting through rain-soaked fields, Azkaban's towers shrinking behind him, 12 years of wrongful imprisonment cracking his bones and eating his sanity one bite at a time. They pictured a broken man, half mad, driven by nothing but desperate animal instinct. The Dementors had taken everything from him, hadn't they? His youth. His health. His decade. What was left of Sirius Black except the worst parts? The rage, the grief, the hollow-eyed specter they'd been printing in newspapers for the past week? That's what they assumed. They were wrong. Sirius Black didn't run. Not in the way they meant. He transformed back into his human body on the shores of a mainland lake, stood in the cold for exactly 3 minutes while his bones reset themselves from 12 years of animagus compression, and then he did something nobody expected. He thought. Actually thought. The kind of thinking he hadn't been able to do in Azkaban because the Dementors had stripped thought down to its worst edges. Nothing but the night James and Lily died playing on a loop behind his eyes. But now, standing in the dark with the lake reflecting a half-moon above him, his mind was working again. Rusty as old iron, but working. He had maybe 6 hours before the Ministry's dragnet tightened. He had no wand. He had no money, no contact, no safe house. He had a godson somewhere in England being raised by people Lily had hated. He had a name, pedigree, and 12 years of accumulated certainty about what needed to happen next. The question was the order of operations. He could go to Harry first. Every instinct screamed it. But showing up on a Muggle doorstep, wandless and gaunt and wanted in 2 countries, wouldn't help Harry. It would terrify him, and then the Ministry would arrive and drag Sirius back to Azkaban before sunrise, and Harry would be left worse off than before, now with the memory of his dead godfather's face haunting him on top of everything else. No. He needed to be untouchable before he went to Harry. Sirius sat on a rock by the lake and stared at the water, and piece by piece, the plan assembled itself. It wasn't elegant. It was aggressive and legally unprecedented and would make Dumbledore furious, which was honestly a point in its favor. He'd thought about the Black family laws exactly once since Azkaban, years ago, when he'd had a brief window of clarity between Dementor rounds. He'd remembered something his grandfather Arcturus had told him when he was 8 years old, not because he was expected to use it, but because Arcturus Black had believed a man should know every weapon available to him at all times. The ius antiquum familiae, his grandfather had said, in that voice like quarried stone. The ancient right of blood claim. Older than the Ministry. Older than Hogwarts. If a Black of true blood invokes it at Gringotts before a witness Goblin Council, the claim is absolute. The Ministry cannot challenge it. The courts cannot dissolve it. Even Merlin himself couldn't undo it, though God knows he tried once, or so the story goes. Sirius had been 8. He'd asked what it was for. Protecting what's yours, his grandfather had said simply. When the law fails you. The law had absolutely, catastrophically failed him. He stood up, pulled his filthy robes tighter, and started walking. Gringotts Bank does not close. This was not common knowledge among wizards, who assumed the doors that looked shut at night were shut. They weren't. Gringotts operated on goblin time, which bore no relation to human schedules, and the institution had run continuously without interruption for over 700 years. There were always goblins in the deep halls, always accounts being managed, always the quiet mechanical music of gold changing hands in the dark. The door guard on the Diagon Alley entrance, a goblin named Sharp Fang who had held the post for 90 years and had seen genuinely everything, looked up when the gaunt, hollow-eyed wizard appeared on the steps at 3 in the morning. Sirius stood at the top of the steps and looked down at him. "I am Sirius Orion Black," he said, and his voice was rough as cracked wood but absolutely steady. "Lord of the ancient and noble house of Black. I am here to invoke the ius antiquum familiae before a witness council. I require a senior account manager and a minimum of 3 witnesses under the Goblin Compact of 1347. Sharpfang stared at him for a long moment. Then he stepped aside and pulled the door open. We've been expecting something like you, the goblin said, which was the most Gringotts thing anyone had ever said. Eventually, the deep halls of Gringotts at 3 in the morning were a different world. The terrace-facing marble and gold of the upper bank gave way to older stone as they descended, darker, heavier, carved with runes that had no translation in any human language Sirius had ever studied. Chandeliers of cold blue goblin fire cast everything in sharp shadow. The air smelled of iron and old paper and something else, something mineral and ancient, like the mountain itself was breathing. The account manager who met him in the council chamber was named Ironbrace, and he was old, genuinely old, which for a goblin meant something, with skin the color and texture of bark and eyes like black glass. He wore robes of deep red and carried no quill because he didn't need one. Everything he needed, he remembered. 2 other goblins sat at the sides of the curved stone table. Witnesses. The Goblin Compact was very specific about witnesses. Ironbrace looked at Sirius the way a jeweler looks at a stone of unknown origin, assessing, calculating, withholding judgment. You understand, the goblin said, that invoking the ius antiquum familiae is an irrevocable act. It cannot be undone by you, by the Ministry of Magic, or by any magical authority recognized under the Goblin Wizard Accords. I understand. You understand that a blood claim establishes full legal guardianship under ancient wizarding law, predating the Ministry's Guardianship Act of 1792, and therefore supersedes it in cases of conflict. I understand. You understand that the claimed individual, one Harrison James Potter, son of James Charles Potter and Lily Eileen Potter née Evans, will have his current guardianship arrangement dissolved upon the completion of this claim, and that all protections, rights, and responsibilities of House Black will attach to him immediately and permanently until he reaches his majority. I understand. Ironbrace leaned forward slightly. And you understand, Lord Black, that you are currently a wanted fugitive, and that this act will bring you to the Ministry's immediate attention? Sirius looked at him steadily. That's rather the point. The goblin was quiet for a moment. Then the corner of his thin mouth moved in something that might, generously, have been interpreted as respect. Very well, said Ironbrace. Let us begin. The ritual itself was not dramatic in the way wizard rituals tended to be, no explosions of light, no theatrical incantations. It was older than that, older than any style. Ironbrace produced a needle made of something that wasn't quite metal, and Sirius pressed his thumb to it without flinching. 3 drops of blood fell onto a piece of parchment that Sirius was fairly certain was older than England itself. The parchment absorbed the blood immediately, as if it had been thirsty for exactly this. The runes etched around the edge of the parchment flared. Not dramatically, just a clean, quiet gold, like sunrise through thick curtains. One of the witness goblins read aloud in old gobbledygook. The other made a mark in a ledger that was chained to the table. Ironbrace spoke the formal words of the compact in a flat, businesslike voice, and when he finished, the room hummed, a deep, subsonic vibration that Sirius felt in his back teeth, and then was still. The claim is registered, said Ironbrace. House Black formally holds wardship over Harrison James Potter. All previous arrangements are dissolved. He folded his long fingers together on the table. Copies of this registration will be sent to the Department of Family Records at the Ministry, to the Hogwarts Board of Governors, and to any other institution which held documentation of previous guardianship. Including Albus Dumbledore's office? Sirius asked. Dumbledore holds no official guardianship record, Ironbrace said. He was never the legal guardian. He was the arranger. The Dursleys of Number 4, Privet Drive were registered as the legal guardians under the Ministry's records. A pause. Were. Sirius filed that away for later examination. There is one more matter, Ironbrace said, and produced a second piece of parchment, more conventional, this one. The head of House Black traditionally holds a seat on the Wiesengemot. That seat has been vacant since your mother's death. Upon invoking the ancient right, you reassume all titles, properties, and privileges associated with the lordship, including the seat. And my criminal record? Is, legally speaking, complicated. Ironbrace's black eyes were steady. You were never tried. That is documented fact in ministry records. Your own imprisonment paperwork confirms no trial occurred. The ius antiquum grants a lord of a recognized ancient house the right to formal trial before any sentence is carried out. You were imprisoned before trial, which means your imprisonment was, technically, unlawful under pre-ministry law that the blood claim invokes. He tilted his head. You are not exonerated. But you are, as of this moment, entitled to a trial they cannot deny you. Sirius sat back in his chair. He was exhausted, starving, and still smelled like 12 years of Azkaban. But something in his chest, something that had been a cold black hole since the night Peter Pettigrew had destroyed everything, clicked an inch closer to whole. Right, he said quietly. A trial. Good. There is also, Ironbrace continued, the matter of the Black family vault. You have full access, effective immediately. He slid a key across the table. Sirius looked at it. Then he picked it up. I'll need a safe location tonight, he said. A private Gringotts room, if that's possible. I can pay for it now. We have suitable accommodations for clients of your standing. Ironbrace stood. We will also need to arrange a Gringotts solicitor to begin the formal notification process. The ministry will receive their copy of the registration at dawn. I would estimate you have. The goblin checked nothing, simply knew. Approximately 4 hours before the response becomes energetic. Sirius nodded. 4 hours was enough to bathe, eat something, and prepare for what was coming. He stood, and he was still gaunt, still hollow-eyed, still wearing robes that could generously be described as tattered. But he was no longer running. Ironbrace, he said. One more thing. I need the Black family solicitor contacted tonight. The house solicitor, not a ministry one. Nathaniel Good, Ironbrace said immediately. Currently residing in Edinburgh. We will contact him. Tell him he's going to be busy. Sirius pocketed the key. Tell him to bring every piece of law he knows about wrongful imprisonment and the rights of ancient house lords, and tell him that by tomorrow afternoon, the Ministry of Magic is going to have a very serious problem. He followed the goblin out of the council chamber, and behind him, the registration parchment sat on the ancient stone table, still faintly glowing, gold and certain and irrevocable as sunrise. 4 hours later, Sirius was clean. Federal dressed in clothes from the emergency Black family wardrobe that Gringotts maintained, because of course they did, because the Blacks had always believed in being prepared to re-emerge from catastrophe looking immaculate, and sitting in a private room with Nathaniel Good, who was 63 years old, had been the Black family solicitor for 25 of them, had seen extraordinary things in that time, and whose face was doing something remarkable as he read through the documents. Ironbrace had prepared. You actually did it, Good said. He was a compact man with silver hair and the kind of careful, precise bearing of someone who spent his life choosing words like he was diffusing things. The ius antiquum? I've had that clause in the back of my mind for 30 years and never once thought, does it hold? Sirius asked. He was on his third plate of food and not remotely embarrassed about it. It holds, Good said, and there was a particular emphasis in his voice, the emphasis of a professional who has just been handed something that makes him very happy in a legal sense. Lord Black, it absolutely holds. The ministry will howl. They will try to challenge it. And they will fail, because the ius antiquum predates the ministry's founding charter, and every charter since has included a non-interference clause regarding pre-existing goblin-witnessed compacts precisely because the goblins insisted on it after the rebellion of Nathaniel. The important parts. Good set the documents down. The claim is airtight. Harry Potter is your legal ward under ancient law. The Dursleys have no standing. The ministry's records are being amended as we speak. He picked up another page. The wrongful imprisonment argument is also strong, genuinely strong. The fact that there's no trial record isn't just irregular, it's illegal under every version of the law that's been in effect since 1756. If you had been a Muggle-born wizard, the press would have been screaming about it for a decade. But you're black, which meant everyone assumed I was guilty and moved on. Yes, Good said without flinching from it. The Wiesengemat seat is yours by right of the blood claim. You can take it. That means you have a voice in your own trial proceedings, and under ancient law, a lord with a Wiesengemat seat cannot be held without bail during trial preparation. He looked up. Sirius. They cannot put you back in Azkaban while the trial is pending. The room was very quiet. Sirius stared at the wall. Outside this building, the ministry was waking up to the notification. Somewhere, an owl was landing on Dumbledore's desk at Hogwarts. Somewhere in Surrey, the Dursleys were asleep in their house, unaware that their legal claim on the boy they'd housed and resented for 12 years had just evaporated. Somewhere, Harry Potter was asleep in a cupboard or a small room, not knowing anything had changed. It has, though, Sirius thought. Harry. Everything has. There's going to be a circus, he said. An extraordinary one. Good agreed, with a solicitor's appreciation for dramatic legal situations. The ministry will try to arrest you the moment you surface publicly. You have the right to refuse arrest pending trial scheduling. I will communicate this to them formally. If they attempt to arrest you anyway, they can try. Sirius said it without heat or bravado. Just fact. What's my first move? Good thought about it. The Morning Prophet. Today's edition. We need your statement in print before the ministry frames the narrative. Sirius shook his head. Not yet. Harry first. That's emotionally understandable, but strategically, Harry first. Sirius said again, and there was something in his tone that made Good understand this was not a point for debate. Then the prophet. The response, when it came fast. Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, received her copy of the Gringotts registration at 5:43 in the morning and had the document reread to her twice by her assistant before she put her coffee down very carefully and said, Get me Crouch. And get me the ministry's oldest law texts. The ones in storage. The ones nobody reads. Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic, received his copy at 6:15 and spilled pumpkin juice on himself. Albus Dumbledore received his copy at 6:16, read it once, set it down on his desk, and sat very still for a long moment, while Fawkes watched him from his perch with the particular attentiveness of a phoenix who knew something important had just shifted. Then Dumbledore picked up his quill and began writing. Sirius was already in a Gringotts carriage by 6:30, rolling through the tunnels toward the surface, when Good's charmed notebook activated with a message from their contact inside the ministry. Good read it, and his expression did something. The minister has authorized the deployment of 6 Aurors to bring you in, he said. They're being told it's a safety measure. 6, Sirius said. That's almost flattering. There's also a message from Hogwarts. Good hesitated. From Dumbledore. What does it say? Good read it aloud. Sirius. I understand what you've done and I ask that you stop before this escalates. Harry's placement with the Dursleys is a necessary protection rooted in magic you may not fully understand. I ask you to contact me before you act further. I believe we can resolve this. Albus. Sirius took the notebook and read the message himself. Then he handed it back. Tell him, he said, that I'm happy to discuss it with him. After I have Harry. And if he, Nathaniel. Sirius looked at his solicitor with 12 years of unspent conviction behind his eyes. Dumbledore is brilliant, and I respect him. But he left my godson with people I've never met, without a trial, without even checking whether I was actually guilty. He made that decision by himself and didn't tell anyone. His jaw was set. The claim is done. Harry is mine, legally and magically. If Dumbledore wants to argue about ancient blood magic with the Goblin Council at Gringotts, he's welcome to try. He turned back to the window of the carriage as the tunnel rushed by. "He won't, though," Sirius said quietly. "He knows better." Privet Drive at 7 in the morning was the most aggressively normal street Sirius had ever seen. He'd been to Surrey twice in his life and hated it both times. The houses were identical, the gardens were competitive in a joyless way, and the whole neighborhood had the energy of a place that had voted, collectively, to being curious about the world. He and Good arrived by foot to the nearby Leaky Cauldron equivalent, a small wizarding transit point on the edge of the town, and walked the last quarter mile. Good was carrying the legal documentation in a sealed portfolio. Sirius was carrying nothing except himself, which was, he was beginning to understand, enough. Number 4, Privet Drive looked like the rest of them. Neat. Bland. The garden was fussed over in a way that suggested the owner cared deeply about appearances, and not much else. There were no toys in the front garden. No trace that a child lived here, which struck Sirius somewhere between his ribs. He knocked on the door at 7:12 in the morning. The door opened to reveal an enormous man, not just large but large, like someone had inflated a man and not quite stopped in time, with a thick neck and small, suspicious eyes. Vernon Disley looked at Sirius, took in the wizarding robes, the gaunt face, and the absolute absence of apology in his expression, and began to go purple. "We don't want any of your Vernon Disley," Sirius said. "Not a question. My name is Sirius Black, Lord of the ancient and noble house of Black and legal guardian of Harrison James Potter." He let that sit for exactly 1 second. "I'm here for my godson." Vernon started to bluster. Sirius talked through it, not loudly, not angrily, with the particular quietness of a man who has absolutely nothing to prove. "This is Nathaniel Good, my solicitor. He has documentation, registered with Gringotts and the Ministry of Magic, confirming Harry's guardianship has transferred to me under ancient wizarding law. You are no longer his legal guardian as of approximately 5:43 this morning." He tilted his head slightly. "I'm going to come in now and get Harry's things. You can cooperate with that, or you can call the police, in which case Mr. Good will explain to them the relevant documentation, and we'll be here for longer. But the outcome will be the same." Vernon's color had passed purple and was approaching something medically concerning. "Now see here, we'd like to come in," Good said pleasantly, because he had done versions of this before and found pleasantness wrong-footed people more efficiently than anything else. Petunia Disley appeared at Vernon's shoulder, went pale at the sight of Sirius, and read the room considerably faster than her husband. She touched Vernon's arm. "Let them in, Vernon," she said, in a voice like someone who has been quietly waiting for a knock on the door for a long time. The house smelled of cooked bacon and furniture polish. The living room was full of photographs, the Disleys at various points in their lives, their son Dudley at every conceivable size, and conspicuously, entirely absent of Harry. Sirius clocked this immediately. Filed it. "Where is he?" he asked Petunia. "Still sleeping," she said, not meeting his eyes. "The small room. Second door on the right upstairs." Sirius started for the stairs. He doesn't know you're coming," Petunia said suddenly to his back. He paused on the second step. "I know. He might be." She stopped. Sirius turned to look at her. He had known Lily Evans. Not well, he'd been James's friend first, and Petunia had made her feelings about wizards clear early and often, but he remembered Lily talking about her sister with a particular mix of love and sorrow that suggested something complicated. He looked at Petunia Disley now and saw a woman who had been given a child she hadn't wanted and hadn't known how to love and had responded by doing this. This house. This absence of photographs. He didn't forgive her for it. But he understood the shape of it. "He'll be all right," Sirius said, and went upstairs. The door to the small room was closed. Sirius stood in front of it for a moment. From inside, the silence was total. He knocked. Softly. A pause. Then movement, the particular careful movement of someone who wakes listening for the tone of what's coming. "Yeah?" Harry's voice. 13 years old, still half asleep, already on guard. Sirius opened the door. The room was small. Smaller than it should have been. There was a bed, a desk, a wardrobe, a small collection of schoolbooks arranged with the precision of someone who cared about the few things they owned. The window let in a thin blade of morning light. Harry Potter sat up in bed and looked at him. He looked like James. Everyone always said that, and they were right. The dark hair, the bone structure, the slight build that suggested he'd be tall someday if someone fed him properly. But his eyes were lilies, green and sharp, and currently doing a rapid, practiced assessment of the stranger in his doorway the way eyes do when they've learned that strangers and doorways require immediate evaluation. Then the assessment landed on something. The face, maybe, or the bearing, or something magic recognized before the brain caught up, and Harry went very still. "You're Sirius Black," he said. "Yeah," Sirius said. "I am. You're supposed to be in Azkaban. I escaped." Harry stared at him. "Everyone says you're a murderer." "I know." Sirius leaned against the doorframe. "I'm not. But that's a longer conversation, and we should probably have it somewhere that isn't Surrey." Harry's jaw worked slightly. He was 13 years old and he'd already learned, Sirius could see, not to show too much on his face, not excitement, not hope, not fear. He kept everything close and quiet and evaluated before he committed to it. Good instincts, Sirius thought, and hated that he had them. "Why are you here?" Harry asked. "To get you." Sirius kept his voice level. "Easy." Nothing that required anything from Harry yet. "I'm your godfather. I invoked an old family law last night that makes me your legal guardian. Legally and magically, as of this morning, you're my ward. My responsibility." He paused. "Mine to take care of. If you'll let me." The room was very quiet. Harry's eyes had done something, not much, just a slight tightening that could have been anything. But Sirius noticed. "You only just escaped," Harry said carefully. "You don't have a wand. The ministry wants you arrested." "True. True. And true. So how exactly is this plan supposed to work?" And Sirius smiled, the first real smile in 12 years, crooked and bright and entirely too much like his younger self, and said, "I've already made moves that the ministry can't undo. I have a solicitor downstairs who is 3 steps ahead of their legal team, and I've just walked into your aunt's house at 7 in the morning without anyone stopping me. How's that for a start?" Harry looked at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, with the careful precision of someone who had learned that hope could be rationed in small, manageable amounts, he pushed back his blanket and swung his legs to the floor. "I'll get my things," he said. It wasn't trust, not yet. But it was a door opening, and Sirius understood the difference, and he took it for what it was. "Take your time," he said. And then, because the room was small and sparse and told him everything he needed to know about the last decade. "Harry, you're not going back. Whatever happens with the ministry, whatever Dumbledore says, whatever anyone says, you are not coming back to this house. I want you to know that." Harry stopped moving. His back was to Sirius. "Okay," he said after a moment. His voice was careful, like he was practicing what it felt like to believe something. Sirius gave him the room. He stood in the doorway and watched the morning light move across the floor of the smallest room in the smallest house on the most ordinary street in England, and felt something inside him, old and cracked and long neglected, begin, cautiously, to mend. Downstairs, Good had handled the Dursleys with brisk professionalism. The documents were signed, Vernon under protest, Petunia with a pen that barely shook, and by the time Harry came down the stairs with his trunk floating behind him, his awl Hedwig sitting on his arm and blinking at Sirius with enormous amber eyes, the legal transfer of guardianship was complete in every way that Muggle law could recognize. Petunia stood in the kitchen doorway. She looked at Harry, and Harry looked at her, and whatever had been between them for 13 years, which was not love but was not nothing, passed silently between them in the 3 seconds they held eye contact. "Right, then," Harry said. "Right," Petunia said. "That was it. That was all of it." Sirius put his hand briefly on Harry's shoulder as they walked to the door, not grabbing, not steering, just a light acknowledgement that registered between them and was gone. Harry didn't pull away. They walked out into Privet Drive in the morning light, and behind them, the door to number 4 closed quietly, and didn't reopen. They were 2 streets away when Harry said, "How much trouble are you actually in?" "Substantial," Sirius admitted. "And the legal thing you did last night? That actually works?" "Apparently better than I hoped." Harry looked at him sideways. "Dumbledore's going to be furious." "Yeah." Sirius glanced at him. "Does that bother you?" Harry thought about it. Really considered it, with the seriousness of someone who took questions seriously. "No," he said finally. "He left me with the Dursleys for 13 years without, he never." Harry stopped. Reorganized. "He could have checked." "He could have," Sirius agreed quietly. "He didn't." "No." They walked another half-block. Hedwig shuffled on Harry's arm and made a small sound. "Tell me about my parents," Harry said. Sirius looked at him. Harry was looking straight ahead, chin up, green eyes steady, not demanding, just asking, plainly and directly, for the thing he'd wanted for 13 years. Sirius thought about the 1,000 ways he'd imagined this conversation. The things he'd rehearsed in Azkaban on the days he'd been able to think at all. James laughing. Lily's voice. The way the 4 of them had been young and brilliant and stupid and so absolutely certain they were going to survive everything. "Your dad," Sirius said, "once tried to transfigure the Hogwarts lake into pumpkin juice on a dare, and instead accidentally turned the giant squid orange. It stayed orange for a week. McGonagall never found out who did it, which was its own miracle because James was absolutely terrible at keeping a straight face." Harry let out a short, surprised laugh. Just one note. But it was there. "Yeah?" he said. "Your mum sent him one letter about it." "Just one. It said, 'James, I heard about the squid. You are an idiot, and I love you.'" He kept it. Harry was quiet for a moment. But the line of his shoulders had changed, just slightly, just enough. "Tell me more," he said. And Sirius did. He talked all the way to the transit point, and Harry listened with the focused attention of someone storing away treasure, and the Ministry's dragnet was tightening across Britain, and Dumbledore's owl was already in flight, and 6 Aurors were being briefed on their morning's assignment, and none of it, not any of it, touched them on that ordinary stretch of Surrey Road, where a godfather was telling his godson about his father for the very first time, and the morning was pale gold and the air smelled of cut grass, and it was, for the length of that walk, enough. It was more than enough. It was the beginning of everything. Ch1 Chapter 2. The Ward. The Leaky Cauldron at 7:40 in the morning was quiet in the way that places are quiet when they're not actually empty. A few travelers nursing early drinks in corners, Tom the barkeep wiping glasses with mechanical patience, the smell of old wood and fireplace smoke and decades of spilled butterbeer pressed into the floorboards. It was the kind of quiet that had texture to it. It stopped being quiet the moment Sirius Black walked through the door. Tom looked up. Froze. The glass in his hand continued being wiped by pure muscle memory, while his brain did something else entirely. "Morning," Sirius said, moving through the bar with Harry beside him and Good bringing up the rear with the trunk trailing obediently behind. He said it like a man who belonged everywhere he went, which had always been one of his more useful qualities. Tom's mouth opened. Closed. "We need the flu," Good said pleasantly, producing a Gringotts access card and setting it on the bar with a small click. "Private access, billed to House Black." Tom looked at the card. Looked at Sirius. Looked at Harry, whom he presumably recognized because Tom recognized everyone. Then he looked back at the card. "Right," he said. "Private flus through the back. Door on the left." They were through it before anyone in the bar had processed what they'd seen, though within the hour, Tom would tell the story 4 times to 4 different people, and each telling would be slightly more dramatic than the last. The private flu connected to a transit hub maintained by Gringotts for clients of significant standing, which meant, in practice, that it was clean, it was fast, and nobody would report who'd used it or when. Sirius stepped through first, then Harry, who came through with the practiced ease of someone who'd used flu travel before but still hated it, a fine layer of ash on his glasses, jaw set with the mild indignation of a person who refuses to let travel inconvenience be a significant event. He wiped his glasses on his sleeve. "Where are we?" "Edinburgh," Good said, stepping through behind him. "My office building. First floor has been prepared for you." The building was old and narrow, sandwiched between a Muggle solicitor's firm and a bookshop that had been in the same family for 150 years. The wizarding side of it, accessible through a door that Muggles' eyes consistently slid past, was 3 floors of dark wood and organized chaos, and the particular energy of a legal practice that handled cases most solicitors wouldn't touch. Good's assistant, a sharp-eyed young witch named Vessa, who had clearly been up for some time and was operating on coffee and righteous professional excitement, handed Sirius a folder the moment he walked in. "The Ministry's first response came in at 7:30, she said. "They've formally contested the blood claim on grounds of, and I'm quoting here, procedural irregularity in the invocation of an archaic statute not recognized under current Ministry law." Sirius handed the folder to Good without looking at it. "Can they contest it?" "No," Good said, already reading. "That's not how goblin-witnessed compacts work, and they know it. This is posturing." He turned a page. "They've also issued a formal arrest warrant. Expected. They've simultaneously received a letter from me this morning informing them that any attempt to detain Lord Black without scheduling a formal trial violates ancient house rights, and that any such detention will result in, Nathaniel," Sirius said. "How long before they move past posturing?" Good thought. "Today. They'll try something today." He looked up. "We need your statement to the Prophet in the next 3 hours. We need breakfast in the next 10 minutes, Sirius said, looking at Harry. Harry, who had been standing slightly apart and absorbing the entire morning's events with that watchful green-eyed attention of his, blinked. "I'm fine. You're 13 and you haven't eaten. Don't do that thing where you insist you're fine." Harry looked faintly startled. Like "don't do that thing" was a category of statement he hadn't expected to receive. "I'm actually hungry," he admitted after a beat. "Good. Same." Sirius turned to Vessa. "Is there food?" They ate in Good's upstairs kitchen, which was not designed for 2 people to have a significant conversation but was doing its best. Vessa had conjured eggs and toast and a pot of strong tea, and Harry sat across from Sirius at a narrow table and ate with the particular focused energy of someone who'd learned not to take meals for granted. Sirius watched him without being obvious about it. Or tried to. He wasn't sure he succeeded. Harry caught him looking, somewhere around the second slice of toast, and his expression did something complicated, not quite uncomfortable, not quite self-conscious, more like he was deciding how to categorize what was happening. "Ask," Harry said. "Whatever you're thinking." "I was thinking you're too thin," Sirius said. Harry considered this. "The Dursleys weren't." He paused. Redirected. "It wasn't great." "I know." Sirius kept his voice neutral because he needed to, because the alternative was an anger that wouldn't help anyone right now. "I figured from the room." Harry looked at his plate. "It wasn't, I mean, they weren't cruel, exactly. Not most of the time. They just sort of didn't notice me. Except when they did, which wasn't good." The accuracy of that description, delivered with such flat precision by a 13-year-old, hit Sirius like a fist. "That won't happen again," Sirius said. "You keep saying things like that," Harry said, not accusatory, just observational. "Like you're certain." "I am certain. You're a wanted fugitive with a legally airtight claim on your guardianship, a Wisengamot seat I'm about to activate, and 12 years of accumulated motivation to make sure nothing about your life looks like the last 12 years. He picked up his tea. "I can be certain about the important things even when the surrounding situation is complicated." Harry looked at him for a moment. Then he went back to eating, but the angle of his shoulders had shifted, just marginally, just enough for someone paying attention. "Tell me what happened," Harry said. "All of it." Peter Pettigrew. "The night my parents died." "Why you were in Azkaban." "Everything." So Sirius told him. He'd thought, on the way to Privet Drive, that he'd ease into it. He'd thought he'd build up to the hard parts, find a gentle route through the story that didn't hit Harry like a wall. But Harry wasn't asking gently, and he deserved not to be handled, so Sirius just told it straight. The Fidelius charm, the switch to Peter at the last minute, that horrible night, finding Peter, finding the wreckage of Godric's Hollow, the arrival of the Ministry, and then 12 years in Azkaban for a crime that Peter had committed before faking his own death and hiding in Scabbers. Harry listened without interrupting. He ate with decreasing focus as the story went on, and by the end he wasn't eating at all, just sitting very still with his elbows on the table and his eyes fixed on Sirius. "Peter Pettigrew is Ron's rat," Harry said. "Yes." "He's been in the castle." "Yes." "All this time." Harry's voice was even, but there was something underneath it, something compressed and pressurized. "He's been alive all this time, and you were in Azkaban for what he did." "Yes." "That's—" Harry stopped. Pressed his lips together. Started again. "That's not okay." "No," Sirius agreed. "It's not." They were quiet. Outside the window, Edinburgh was getting on with its morning, entirely unaware that two people at a kitchen table were reassembling the wreckage of a family. "I believe you," Harry said. "Matter of fact. No ceremony." Sirius looked at him. "I know I don't have proof," Harry continued, "and I know I've just met you properly, and I know that's probably, I don't know, naive. But I believe you." He pushed his plate aside. "Peter was in Gryffindor with you. He was the one who ran off when you cornered him, wasn't he? That's what the witnesses said. He blew up the street and ran, and you were standing there laughing. They said you were laughing." "I was," Sirius said. "I'd lost my mind for about 30 seconds. It was that or scream." Harry nodded slowly. "The laughing makes more sense if you're someone who just realized you'd lost everything and Peter did it. It makes no sense if you actually killed 12 people." "You've thought about this," Sirius said. "I've had a weird year," Harry said, which was possibly the understatement of the decade. "I think about things." "Your father thought things through," Sirius said. "Took him a bit longer to get there sometimes, but he always got there." He paused. "Your mother was faster. She'd have taken 2 minutes to figure out what you just did." Harry absorbed this. "What do we do about Peter? Right now?" "Nothing. We establish our position first. Once I have standing, a trial, a seat on the Wiesengemot, proof of wrongful imprisonment, then we go after Peter. That's harder to ignore than a fugitive screaming about a rat. And until then?" "Until then," Sirius said, "we make it impossible for anyone to put you back in that house." Good's office descended into productive chaos for the next 2 hours. The solicitor drafted responses to 3 separate ministry communications, composed the press statement for the Daily Prophet, which Sirius reviewed, amended substantially, and finally signed, and managed 4 separate full contacts with increasingly agitated ministry officials, each of whom Good handled with the precision of a man who found legal combat genuinely enjoyable. Harry sat in the corner of the office and watched all of it, and at some point Vessa brought him a copy of the British Wizarding Law Compendium volume concerning the Ius Antiquum Familiae because he'd asked for it, and by mid-morning he was reading it with the same intensity he'd given to the first-year spell textbooks, highlighting things in his mind. Sirius kept track of him, while also managing everything else, which felt natural in a way he hadn't expected. His attention had always divided well, one of the things that had made him a good Auror candidate, back when Auror was something he'd been going to be. At 9:43, a ministry owl arrived at the window, large and official and carrying a letter sealed with the stamp of the Office of the Minister for Magic. Good read it. His expression cycled through several things. "Fudge is requesting a meeting," he said. "Today. At the ministry." He looked up. He's framing it as a discussion of transitional arrangements. Which means he wants to find a way to undo what you've done without admitting he can't legally undo it. Tell him I'll meet him tomorrow, Sirius said, without looking up from the document he was reading. Tomorrow. In the atrium. Publicly. Sirius set the document down. I want witnesses. Good made the note. At 10:15, a second owl arrived. This one was not ministry official. It was a school owl, one of Hogwarts' barn owls, carrying a letter in handwriting that Sirius recognized after 12 years without hesitation, because some things you didn't forget. He took the letter and opened it. Sirius, I will not pretend I'm not concerned, because you know me well enough to see through it. What you've done is legal, and I understand why you've done it. I would like to ask you to consider that the protections surrounding Harry's placement with his mother's family exist for very specific reasons rooted in sacrificial magic I believe you may not be fully aware of. I am not your enemy. I was not yours. I am asking you, as someone who has known you since you were 11 years old, to sit down with me before this escalates further. There are things I should tell you about the nature of the threat Harry still faces. I can come to you, if that's easier. Albus Sirius read it twice. Then he handed it to Harry, who was watching. Harry read it. His jaw tightened slightly at protections surrounding Harry's placement, which was a very diplomatic way of describing whatever Dumbledore had arranged, and which Harry had just spent the morning leaving behind. He's not wrong that there are things you might not know, Harry said carefully. No, Sirius agreed. He's probably right about that. Dumbledore usually is. He took the letter back. But being right about some things doesn't mean he gets to make all the decisions forever. Are you going to see him? Yes. Eventually. Sirius folded the letter. But I'm going to see him on my terms, in a place I choose, when I've had more than one morning to stand on. He looked at Harry. And I'm going to have you with me when I do. Harry's eyes did the thing they did when something landed somewhere significant. A brief, contained intensity, quickly settled. Why? Because you're not a chess piece, Sirius said. Any decision Dumbledore wants to make about your life, he can make it to your face. The prophet hit the stands at noon. Sirius didn't have access to a copy immediately, but Vessa monitored the Wizarding News network and reported in with the frequency and precision of a field intelligence operative. The statement had made the front page. Of course it had. It was Sirius Black making a legal move so unexpected that the senior reporter had apparently sat at his desk and reread the Gringotts confirmation 3 times before writing a word. The headline read, Black claims Potter wardship under ancient law. Wrongful imprisonment challenge filed. By 1 in the afternoon, the response was significant. Goods flow was running continuously. Vessa was managing correspondence. Somewhere in the ministry, Fudge was having a very difficult lunchtime. And somewhere else, Sirius felt reasonably certain of this, Dumbledore was sitting at his desk in Hogwarts, reading the prophet over half-moon spectacles and thinking very hard. Harry read the article when Vessa brought the copy in. He read it quietly, the whole thing, and then he read the sidebar, which discussed the blood claim in historical context, described the ius antiquum in terms that were mostly accurate, and included a brief legal analysis confirming that 3 separate wizarding law experts contacted for comment had, reluctantly, confirmed the claim appeared solid. They're treating it like it might not hold, Harry said, setting the paper down. They don't want it to hold, Sirius said. Wanting and reality are different things. There's a quote from the ministry here. An anonymous official who says, Harry found the line, says the claim lacks moral legitimacy given the circumstances of Lord Black's escape from lawful imprisonment. Lawful, Sirius repeated. Yeah. That word's doing a lot of work in that sentence, isn't it? Sirius looked at his godson. 13 years old, had never been taught to think critically about institutional language, and had just identified the exact problem in approximately 4 seconds. Yeah, Sirius said. It is. In the early afternoon, while Good was in a FLA meeting with a ministry liaison and Vessa was fielding press requests, Sirius and Harry ended up in the building's small library, A room that was mostly floor-to-ceiling shelves and 2 chairs jammed into the remaining space and a window overlooking Edinburgh's Old Town. It was the first moment they'd had that wasn't managed by the morning's events, and it had a slightly different texture to it. The noise of everything else was 1 floor down, and in here there was just the city outside and the smell of books and the particular awkwardness of 2 people who were still mostly strangers figuring out how to be in a room together. Harry had picked up a book from a shelf without really looking at it, and was turning it over in his hands. Sirius was looking out the window. "You went to Hogwarts?" Harry said. "Yeah. Gryffindor. Is it obvious?" Harry almost smiled. "A bit." He set the book down. "My dad's friends. You, Lupin and Pettigrew. Moony, Wormtail and Padfoot. You made the Marauders map." Sirius turned from the window, properly surprised for the first time all morning. "How do you know about the map?" "Fred and George Weasley found it in Filch's office. Gave it to me last year." Harry looked at him steadily. "I've been using it since 3rd year. Have you?" Sirius felt something shift in his chest that was half pride and half a wave of emotion he hadn't quite braced for. His work, their work, James and Remus and Peter and him at 15 scratching runes into enchanted parchment at midnight, and it had ended up in Harry's hands. The universe had an odd sense of continuity. "Does it still work properly?" "Brilliantly." "Good." Sirius turned back to the window. Remus added 3 layers of the anti-detection charms. Peter did the cartography. He was always neat, which none of the rest of us were. He paused. "James and I did the core enchantments." He let a beat pass. "Your dad was better at enchantments than most 7th years by the time we were in 5th. Was he better than you?" "At enchantments?" "Roughly equal." A pause. "At Quidditch, substantially worse, though he never have admitted it." Harry's whole face changed when Quidditch came up, something in it lit, uncomplicated, younger-looking. "You played?" "Beater. 4 years. I'm Seeker." "I know. I heard." His voice shifted slightly on that, the reminder that he'd been hearing about Harry's life secondhand, in fragments, from a distance. "Your first year. Caught the snitch in your mouth." "It was a reflex," Harry said, with the slight defensiveness of someone who told that particular story many times and was still slightly embarrassed by the undignified delivery. "Still counts." Sirius sat down in one of the chairs. "Tell me about your year. Not the news version. Your version." Harry looked at him. "You've answered my questions all morning," Sirius said. "That's your turn." And Harry talked. Haltingly at first, like a door being opened that hadn't been opened in a while, and then more easily. Dementors on the train, the new defense professor who nobody knew anything about, the Grim, Trelawney's predictions, Buckbeak. He talked about Hermione and Ron, about the way the school had been watching him since the announcement of Buckbeak's execution, about the particular weight of having people look at you like you were either a hero or a disaster with nothing in between. Sirius listened. Properly listened, not waiting for his turn to speak but actually taking in what Harry was telling him, tracking the emotional truth underneath the events. Harry was lonely. That was the central fact. He had friends, real ones who'd bleed for him, but he was lonely in the specific way of someone who never had an adult fully in his corner. Someone whose business it was to be in his corner, who showed up without being asked. "The Dementors bother you more than they bother other people," Sirius said, when Harry mentioned the fainting on the train. Harry's jaw tightened. I hear my parents. When they get close." The room was very quiet. "I heard your father," Sirius said, after a moment. "In Azkaban. The happy memory the Dementors took from me first was of James laughing. They always take the best ones first." He met Harry's eyes. "It's not weakness that they affect you more. It's that you have a specific, terrible memory they're aiming at. That's different." Harry was looking at him with an expression that was working very hard not to be the look of someone who'd just been told something they'd needed to hear for a long time. "The Patronus," Harry said. "Professor Lupin's been teaching me." "Has he?" Sirius felt a complicated warmth at that. Remus, still teaching, still brilliant, still doing the right thing however difficult the circumstances. Is it working? I got a partial one. A kind of silver smoke thing. Lupin says I'm close. What do you use? For the memory? Harry thought. First time flying on a broom. He said. First time I knew I was actually good at something. Sirius absorbed that. First time I knew I was actually good at something. Not a childhood memory of his parents, not a family holiday, not a birthday. A broom. When we're settled somewhere proper, Sirius said, I'll teach you more. There are versions of the Patronus charm that. He stopped. Smiled slightly. We'll get to that. One thing at a time. Where are we going? Harry asked. When this is settled? Home, Sirius said. The word felt strange in his mouth, not from lack of meaning but from having too much of it. The Black family house in London. Grim old place. It needs work. My mother was the last one there, and she wasn't exactly a warm presence. But it's mine, and it's protected by every ancient ward the Blacks ever put up, which is significant. He paused. It'll be ours. Harry was quiet for a moment. Then, you keep saying ours. I keep meaning it. Another silence. Not uncomfortable, the kind of silence that has earned its place. Okay, Harry said quietly. Okay. The afternoon went sideways at 3:17. 2 ministry auras appeared at the front door of Good's building with an official warrant, a determination to take Sirius into custody, and what Sirius suspected was a significant underestimation of what they were walking into. He heard Vessa's voice downstairs, polite, firm, entirely unintimidated, and then Good's voice, and then raised voices, and then Sirius came down the stairs with Harry one step behind him and walked into the front room. The 2 auras were young, late 20s, well-trained, doing their jobs. One of them was a woman with red hair cropped close and sharp eyes. The other was a man with the look of someone who'd been told this was a simple assignment, and was beginning to suspect it wasn't. Both of them stiffened when Sirius came in. Lord Black, said the woman. Her voice was professional. I'm Aura Brightwell. We have a warrant for your detention pending. Pending what? Sirius asked. She blinked. Pending review of your escape from. Pending review of my unlawful imprisonment without trial? Sirius tilted his head. Because that's actually what's pending, legally speaking. My solicitor, Mr. Good, has filed documentation with the Ministry confirming that under the ius antiquum familiae, and the ancient rights pertaining thereto, I cannot be held without a formally scheduled trial. Which has not been scheduled. He let a beat pass. Has it? The auras exchanged a look. Additionally, Good said from beside the window, in his pleasant and utterly implacable way, any attempt to detain Lord Black under a warrant issued after the filing of the blood claim constitutes a violation of Section 12 of the Goblin-Wizard Accords of 1347, which your senior aura leadership has been informed of in a letter sent this morning. If you'd like, I have a copy here. He held up a copy. Brightwell's jaw worked. She was smart. Sirius could see her running the math, checking what she'd been told against what was in front of her, finding they didn't align. She hadn't been briefed on the Goblin Accord's angle. That was the Ministry's problem, not hers. Brightwell, Sirius said, and he kept his voice perfectly even, perfectly reasonable. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to fight you. I'm in my solicitor's office in the middle of Edinburgh and I'm engaged in a legal process. Whatever your warrant says, it doesn't supersede ancient house rights, and your department's legal team knows that, which is why the warrant will have been worded very carefully to avoid saying so directly. He tilted his head slightly. Check the exact wording. I'll wait. Brightwell looked at him for a long moment. Then she took the warrant out and read it again, carefully, in the way someone reads a document when they've been told what it says but are now checking for themselves. Her expression shifted. Just slightly. We're required to report your location to the department, she said. You've found my location, Good said pleasantly. Mr. Good's office is Edinburgh. Perfectly reportable. Another moment. Then Brightwell folded the warrant. "We'll be in contact," she said, which was the dignified version of "we've lost this round." "Of course," Sirius said. They left. The door closed behind them. Vessa let out a breath. Harry, from the bottom of the stairs, uncrossed his arms. "That worked," Harry said, with the specific tone of someone who'd believed it would work but is still registering that it did. "Most things work if you understand the rules better than the people trying to use them against you," Sirius said. He looked at Harry. "And if you're not afraid." "Are you not afraid?" Sirius thought about it honestly for a moment. "I spent 12 years in Azkaban for something I didn't do. I've done the worst thing that can happen to me, and I came out the other side." He shrugged one shoulder. "There's very little left that scares me." Harry was quiet. Then, "The Dementors still scare me." "Yeah." Sirius looked at him. "That's different. That's trauma, not fear. And trauma fades, with the right tools and enough time." He moved past Harry toward the stairs. "Which is what we're building. Time." By evening, they had 3 new developments: a formal communication from the Ministry scheduling a preliminary hearing for the following week, a letter from the Hogwarts Board of Governors confirming receipt of the guardianship transfer and requesting clarification on Harry's continued enrollment status, and an owl from Remus Lupin. Sirius read Remus's letter twice, standing at the kitchen window with the city going gold and orange outside. It was short, the way Remus wrote when he was feeling a lot, pad foot. "You absolute lunatic. I just read the prophet. I actually spilled my tea. I don't know whether to be furious or relieved. I'm both. Mostly relieved. I'd like to see you. Both of you, if Harry will have me. I have things to say that I should have said a long time ago. Write back. Or better yet, just tell me where to come. I can be there by tonight." Moony Sirius handed it to Harry, who was sitting at the kitchen table doing something with a piece of parchment, doodling, maybe, or writing something he'd scratch out. Harry took the letter and read it. "Who's Moony?" Harry asked. "Remus Lupin. His marauder name." Harry looked up. "Professor Lupin? He's a professor this year?" Sirius actually hadn't known that. Dumbledore's appointment, presumably, and a good one. Trust Remus to be teaching defense against the dark arts while also being a werewolf in uncertain employment circumstances and managing to be excellent at it regardless. "Good. He's the best at it. He's been teaching me the Patronus," Harry said. "I know. You told me." Sirius leaned against the counter. "Do you want to see him?" Harry turned the letter over in his hands, thinking. He thought about things deliberately. Sirius was learning, took the time that was actually required. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I think so. He's—" Sirius stopped. Started again. "He was your parents' other best friend. He's the one who's still—" He caught himself. "I trust him with my life. I trust him with yours. Does he know?" Harry looked at him. "About Peter? He knows I've always believed it. He'll know the rest when he gets here." Sirius straightened. "I'll write back." He sat at the table, across from Harry, and pulled parchment toward him. "Moony, Edinburgh. Goods office building. Come now if you can. Bring yourself and nothing else. We have everything we need. Padfoot P.S. He's brilliant. You're going to be insufferably pleased about it." He sealed it, called one of Good's office owls, and sent it. Harry was watching him when he looked up. "He's going to cry," Harry said, with the flat certainty of someone who had seen Lupin cry once already this year, on a separate significant occasion. "Absolutely," Sirius agreed. Is that okay?" "It's good," Sirius said. "It's been a while since any of us cried about something good." Harry looked down at the table. Something crossed his face, quick and complex, and then settled. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Okay." Outside the window, Edinburgh was settling into evening. Somewhere across the city, an owl with a short letter was picking up speed. Somewhere in the ministry, lawyers were reading the ancient law compendium with increasing alarm. Somewhere, a rat with a missing toe was hiding in a castle, and his time was running out. But here, in this narrow building on this quiet street, something was happening that was harder to dismantle than any law the ministry could invoke, or any chess move Dumbledore could make. A boy who had never been chosen was learning what it felt like to be chosen absolutely, and a man who had been hollowed out was filling back up with something that felt dangerously like purpose. They all cleared the rooftops and turned south. Remus Lupin would be here by nightfall. And the ancient and noble House of Black, for the first time in a long time, was beginning to feel less like a name and more like a home. Chapter 3. The hearing Remus Lupin arrived at 8:30 with a battered traveling cloak, a cardboard box of biscuits, and the expression of a man who had spent the train journey from Hogsmeade Station rehearsing several things to say and had arrived having discarded all of them. He stood in the doorway of Good's upstairs kitchen and looked at Sirius. Sirius looked back. 12 years is a long time. It changes people in ways that aren't entirely visible from the outside. You have to know the before to read the after. Remus knew the before. He could see exactly what Azkaban had done, catalogued in the gray at Sirius's temples and the new hollows under his cheekbones and the particular careful way he was holding himself, like a man who had been cold for a very long time and was still not entirely convinced it was warm. But his eyes were the same. That was the thing. Whatever Azkaban had taken, it hadn't taken the thing behind Sirius's eyes, that specific quality of intelligence and stubbornness and barely leashed energy that Remus had known since they were 11 years old and sharing a dormitory and becoming, without planning to, the most important people in each other's lives. "You," Remus said, "are the most reckless, brilliant, infuriating, hello Moony, completely unhinged person I have ever known in my entire life. Still hello Moony." Remus crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled him into a hug that was more like a collision, the kind of embrace that has 12 years of grief in it, and Sirius gripped back just as hard, and neither of them said anything for a moment because there wasn't anything that needed saying, not yet. Harry, sitting at the table with a mug of tea he'd been nursing for 20 minutes, watched this with the particular expression of someone witnessing something private and not quite knowing where to put their eyes. Remus let go first. Stepped back. His eyes were doing exactly what Harry had predicted they'd do. Then Remus turned and looked at Harry, and his face did something that went well past crying. "Harry," he said. "Hi, Professor," Harry said. "I think—" Remus stopped. Cleared his throat. "Outside this room, I'm still your professor. In this room, I think you can call me Remus." "Okay." Harry considered him. "You knew about the blood claim?" "I read the prophet on the train." Remus pulled out a chair and sat down heavily, like his legs had been making this decision without consulting him. He set the biscuits on the table. "I nearly apparat directly to the ministry to cause a scene. But you came here instead," Sirius said, sitting down across from him. "You had it handled." "You always have it handled." Something complicated passed through Remus's expression. "That's not always, I mean I should have." He stopped. Pressed his hands flat on the table. "I should have done something. Years ago. I knew where Harry was. I knew the Dursleys weren't." He looked at Harry. "I'm sorry. I should have pushed harder." Harry looked at him for a moment. "You couldn't have changed the guardianship. Not without what Sirius did." "No. But I could have been more present." Remus met his eyes steadily. "I could have visited. Written. I didn't, because Dumbledore believed it was better if Harry's Wizarding World connections were limited during the Dursley years, for the sake of the blood protection, and I—" He exhaled. "I deferred. I shouldn't have." The room was quiet. "You're here now," Harry said. "It wasn't absolution exactly. It was more pragmatic than that, more forward-looking. But it was something." Remus nodded. Then he looked at Sirius. "Peter," he said. "Scabbers," Sirius said. "Gryffindor common room. He's been, all year. Right next to Harry." Remus's voice was controlled and very, very precise. I suspected. Last month, when I got a look at the Marauder's map and saw the name. I wasn't certain, and I should have acted the moment I suspected. We'll deal with Peter, Sirius said. But the order of operations matters. I need the hearing first. I need standing before I start making claims about Pettigrew, otherwise I'm just a fugitive accusing a dead man, and the ministry will bury it. Remus nodded slowly. What's the hearing looking like? Good appeared in the kitchen doorway with a folder, because Good had apparently been listening from the hallway, which said something about his professional thoroughness. Preliminary hearing is scheduled for Thursday. Ministry wants it before a subcommittee rather than the full Wiesengemot, which I've already challenged. Lord Black's Wiesengemot seat entitles him to a full hearing. He came in and sat at the end of the table, opening the folder. I've filed the challenge. Expect a response tomorrow morning. What's Dumbledore doing? Remus asked. He's written twice, Sirius said. I haven't responded yet. Remus gave him the look, the specific look that said Sirius was being deliberately strategic in a way that Remus found simultaneously admirable and slightly worrying. He's not the enemy. I know that. He'll be at the hearing. I'm counting on it. They stayed in Edinburgh that night. Good had 2 spare rooms and Vessa had left a stack of bedding, and by midnight the building was quiet except for the occasional flum message that Good fielded from his study with the tireless dedication of a man who understood that significant legal moments didn't keep civil hours. Sirius couldn't sleep. He barely slept in Azkaban, not real sleep, just the gray half-consciousness the Dementors left you with, never deep enough to dream properly. It was going to take his body a while to learn that sleep was safe again, that there was nothing lurking at the edges of it. He lay in the dark of Good's spare room and listened to the building settle and let his mind run through what was coming. Thursday's hearing was everything. Not the final destination, that would be a full trial, Peter's capture, an official exoneration, but the pivot point. The moment where the ministry either bent to the legal reality Good had constructed or tried to muscle past it, in which case they'd make a very public, very documentable mistake. Sirius knew Fudge. Not well, but well enough. The minister was not stupid, he was something more dangerous than stupid, which was a clever man who prioritized his own political survival above almost everything. Fudge would be looking for the move that protected him regardless of outcome. If the hearing went Sirius's way, Fudge needed to have been seen as fair and procedurally correct. If it didn't, he needed to have been seen as upholding the law. The trap Sirius needed to set was one where the only move that protected Fudge was also the right move. He was still thinking when he heard a soft sound from the hallway. Footsteps, careful ones, trying not to wake anyone. He waited. They paused outside his door, then continued past. Harry. Couldn't sleep either. Sirius gave it 30 seconds, then got up. He found Harry in the library, sitting in one of the chairs with his knees pulled up and his wand in his hands, turning it over and over in the absent way people do when they're thinking hard about something else. Couldn't sleep, Harry said without looking up. Neither. Sirius took the other chair. What's turning over? Harry was quiet for a moment. At the hearing, he said. Am I there? Yes. What do I do? Nothing. You exist. That's enough. Sirius leaned back. You being there, the boy who lived, legally claimed by a house lord, sitting in a hearing room, changes the political calculation for every person in that room. Fudge can't afford to look like he's persecuting you. He might not care about that. He cares about votes. He cares about public approval. He cares about not being the minister who mistreated the child who defeated Voldemort. Sirius tilted his head. We're using that. I'm not sorry about it. Harry absorbed this. Using me. Using the situation. Using what people have made you, yes. Is that... He paused. Is that a problem? Harry thought about it. His face did that deliberate thing again, taking the question seriously instead of answering from reflex. No, he said. If it works. He turned the wand over once more. It's weird. When people use the boy who lived thing, it's usually to make themselves look important. Or to sell something. Or to get me to do something I don't want to do. This is different. I know. That's why it's okay. Harry looked at him. I can tell the difference. How? Because you're not asking me to be the boy who lived. You're just telling me to show up. He paused. That's the first time anyone's told me to just show up, and that'll be enough. Sirius held his gaze. It will be. Harry nodded. Then, carefully. What if it's not, though? What if they decide the blood claim doesn't hold, and they send me back to the Dursleys and arrest you? They can't dissolve the claim, Sirius said. But what if they try? Then I fight harder. He said it without drama. Harry, I have been waiting for 12 years to fight for you properly. If the Ministry thinks they can outstubborn a man who survived Azkaban on the strength of knowing he was right, they are going to have a genuinely educational week. Harry looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not the careful, small smile of someone rationing hope. A real one, sudden and bright, the one that was entirely his own and not James's at all. Okay, he said. Good. Thursday arrived with the efficiency of things that are dreaded, which is to say it arrived exactly on time and felt early. The Ministry of Magic atrium at 9 in the morning was a different organism than its daytime self, busier, louder, the golden statues and the magical-as-might replacement that Sirius understood had come and gone already gleaming under the enchanted ceiling. Ministry employees streamed in through the fireplaces in clusters, robes and ministry colors, the particular purposeful yet disengaged energy of a large institution's morning commute. They stopped when Sirius walked in. Not all of them. Not dramatically. But the ripples spread fast, the way ripples do in enclosed spaces, and by the time Sirius reached the center of the atrium, there was a visible radius of people who had halted entirely, and were doing a very poor job of pretending they hadn't. Sirius was wearing black family formal robes. Good had arranged them, deep charcoal gray with silver edging, the black family crest embroidered at the collar. After 12 years of prison rags, they felt strange. Not uncomfortable. Just significant. Like putting on something he'd forgotten the weight of. Beside him, Harry walked in his school robes because they were the most formal thing he had, and Sirius had decided, deliberately, that Harry looking like a student was its own kind of statement. Behind them came Good, and behind Good came a quiet man named Aldrich Havel, who was the most experienced Wisengamot procedure expert Good had been able to reach on 2 days' notice, and behind him came Remus in his good teaching robes, which were old but well kept. They walked through the atrium like they owned it, which was very nearly legally true. Brightwell, the Auror from Edinburgh, was waiting by the lifts. She looked at Sirius with an expression that was professionally neutral and personally quite interested. Lord Black, she said. The hearing room is on level 2. I know where it is, Sirius said pleasantly. Thank you, Brightwell. They took the lift. The grills shut. The chain links clanked and rattled upward, and in the slightly surreal quiet of the Ministry lift, Harry looked at the ceiling and said, I've been in the Ministry before. I know. 2nd year, I heard. Flying car, Harry confirmed. Did you get expelled? Nearly. McGonagall gave us detentions. He paused. And Snape tried to get us expelled, but McGonagall didn't let him. The lift stopped. The grills opened. Snape, Sirius said, stepping out. We'll talk about Snape later. There's a lot of things we're talking about later, Harry observed. We have time, Sirius said. We have all the time. The hearing room on level 2 was formal and oval and arranged with the particular theatrical severity of spaces designed to make individuals feel small before institutional power. Tiered seating on 3 sides, a curved table at the front where the subcommittee was arranged, high windows that let in precise quantities of natural light. The room smelled of old wood and parchment, and the specific staleness of a space where consequential things had been decided and the air had never quite recovered. Sirius looked at it and thought about the last time he'd been in a Ministry room at all. The night of his arrest, not even a hearing room, just a holding area, and no one had offered him a seat. He sat down now with Harry on his left and Good on his right, and he sat like someone who had arrived exactly where he meant to be. The subcommittee was 5 people. 3 of them Sirius recognized, senior Wisengamot members, none of whom were friends but none of whom were outright enemies. The 4th was someone from Fudge's office, there to represent the minister's interests. The 5th was Amelia Bones. Sirius looked at Amelia Bones and felt a cautious adjustment in his assessment of the proceedings. Amelia Bones was not Fudge's creature. She was one of the most scrupulously fair people the ministry had produced in 2 generations, a reputation she'd earned the hard way through 20 years of cases where fair had been the harder option. She had short gray hair and square spectacles and the bearing of a woman who had been underestimated by enough people to have stopped giving them the benefit of the doubt. She was also, Sirius realized, looking at Harry with an expression that was doing quite a lot of complex work. Fudge himself was not on the committee, that would have been inappropriate, but he was seated in the gallery. Sirius spotted him immediately, a round man in a lime green bowler hat, sitting next to Percy Weasley, who was there in some junior official capacity and was holding a clipboard with the solemnity of someone who believed the clipboard was load-bearing. Dumbledore was in the gallery too. Sirius had expected him. He'd thought about this specific moment, meeting Dumbledore's eyes across a ministry hearing room, and in his preparation he'd run through several possible emotional responses. What actually happened was simpler. Their eyes met, and Sirius held the gaze and didn't look away, and after a moment Dumbledore inclined his head very slightly, and Sirius nodded back. It was not a warm exchange, but it was an honest one. Harry had spotted Dumbledore too. Sirius could tell by the slight shift in his posture, not anxiety, not exactly, but awareness. Attention. Don't look at him, Sirius said quietly, not looking at Harry. I'm not. You are, in your peripheral vision. A brief pause. He's looking at me. Let him. He's worried, not angry. There's a difference. Sirius kept his eyes on the committee. Look at Bones. She's the one who matters today. The hearing was called to order by the committee chair, a broad man named Ogden whom Sirius vaguely remembered as competent and procedural, and then Good rose to deliver an opening statement that was 17 minutes of the most elegant legal argument Sirius had ever heard. Good didn't make emotional appeals. He didn't perform indignation. He simply laid out, in the calm and methodical way of someone who was entirely confident in the structure he was building, the documented facts, no record of a trial, no trial having been offered, the illegality of imprisonment without trial under every version of wizarding law since the Charter of 1756, the invocation of the ius antiquum, the goblin-witnessed registration, the Wisengamot seat, and the resulting legal status of Sirius Orion Black, Lord of the ancient and noble House of Black. Then he sat down. The ministry's representative, a man called Williamson who wore the expression of someone fighting a case he knew he couldn't win, made his counter-argument, which amounted to a procedural challenge to the validity of pre-ministry statute in post-ministry proceedings. It was technically coherent and practically ineffective because, as Hovell had briefed them, every time the ministry's own founding documents had addressed pre-existing goblin compacts, they had specifically and deliberately not superseded them. Amelia Bones made this observation herself, quietly and without drama, in the form of a clarifying question to Williamson that took approximately 30 seconds to answer and approximately 5 more to demolish Williamson's entire position. Sirius liked her very much. The real moment came 40 minutes in, when Ogden turned to Sirius directly. Lord Black, he said, with the careful neutrality of a man navigating political minefields. Perhaps you'd like to address the committee. Sirius stood. He had thought about this too. He'd thought about every version of what he could say. The anger, the grief, the 12 years, the injustice, the faces of the people who'd locked him away without a second thought. He'd thought about performing wounded dignity or cold fury or exhausted righteousness. In the end, he said none of those things. I'd like to ask the committee a simple question, he said. Not a rhetorical one. An actual question, which I'd like an actual answer to. He looked at each of them in turn. Is there a trial record? For my imprisonment. A record of proceedings, of charges formally brought, of a verdict reached by any body with legal authority to reach one. Is there such a record? Silence. Because I've looked. Sirius continued. My solicitor has looked. Gringotts has looked, and they have access to ministry records that predate current filing systems. And what we've found is nothing. No trial record. No hearing. No formal charges brought before a body capable of trying them. He spread his hands. I was imprisoned for 12 years for a crime that was never, in any legal sense, proven. And I'd like the committee to tell me how that happened, and what the ministry intends to do about it. The room was very quiet. Because I'm not angry, Sirius said, and his voice was perfectly steady. I spent 12 years being angry. I'm finished with that. I'm here because my godson deserves a guardian who is free, and legal, and present. I'm here because Peter Pettigrew is alive, and I will prove that, in a proper trial, with evidence, with testimony, with every resource available to me. And I'm here because 12 years of wrongful imprisonment is a wrong that the ministry needs to acknowledge, and correct, and make sure never happens to anyone else. He sat down. The room stayed quiet for another second. Then Amelia Bones spoke. Mr. Ogden, she said, I'd like to formally request that the committee recommend a full Weisengamot trial, with all rights pertaining thereto, be scheduled within 14 days. Ogden looked at her. Looked at Williamson, who said nothing because there was nothing useful left for him to say. Looked at his papers. So noted, Ogden said. It went longer than that. It went 3 hours, total, back and forth on procedural points, on the specific rights afforded by the Weisengamot seat, on the status of the blood claim during trial proceedings. The ministry's team made 4 different arguments, and Good and Havel took them apart with the patient efficiency of people who'd spent 2 days building a case specifically designed to withstand exactly this. Harry sat through all of it. He didn't fidget. He didn't look bored or overwhelmed. He watched with that focused, cataloging attention of his, and whenever a new argument emerged, Sirius could see him following it, tracking the shape of it, filing it. Halfway through, there was a recess, and in the corridor outside the hearing room, Dumbledore materialized beside Sirius with the quiet proficiency of a very tall man who moved much more smoothly than his appearance suggested. Harry looked at him. Sirius stayed where he was. Sirius, Dumbledore said. Albus. You're doing well in there. The blue eyes were steady and complicated behind the half-moon spectacles. Mr. Good is exceptional. He is. I want you to know, Dumbledore said, and his voice had that quality it got sometimes, the one that dropped the performance of wisdom and spoke plainly, that I am genuinely glad you're free. I have thought about you for 12 years. About whether I made the right decision. About what I should have done. And? Sirius asked. And I made decisions based on incomplete information and a great deal of fear. He glanced at Harry. Hello, Harry. Professor, Harry said. You look well. A pause. Better than I expected. I'm fine, Harry said. I've been fine since Thursday morning. Something moved through Dumbledore's expression at that. Acknowledgement, maybe, or the particular kind of hurt that comes from being told, gently but directly, that someone managed without you. I need to speak with you about the blood protection, Dumbledore said to Sirius. The magic lily left. Harry's mother died for him, which created a protection rooted in her blood. That protection was housed in Petunia's home because Petunia is Lily's blood. With Harry no longer residing there, I know about sacrificial magic, Sirius said. Not cutting him off, just meeting him on level ground. I studied it at Hogwarts and I read further afterward. I understand what Lily did. He kept his voice neutral. I also understand that sacrificial protection doesn't require a specific address. It requires intent and blood proximity. Petunia doesn't have to be Harry's guardian for the protection to persist, she just has to be alive and in the same world. He tilted his head slightly. Which she is. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. You've researched this. I had 2 days, Sirius said. I used them well. Another pause. Dumbledore looked at him, and then at Harry, and then at something slightly beyond both of them, the particular distance of a man adjusting his picture of a situation. There are still things we need to discuss, Dumbledore said finally. About Voldemort. About what's coming. Yes, Sirius agreed. And we'll discuss them. At Grimmauld Place, when we're established. You're welcome to come. He met the old man's eyes. As a guest. Not as the person making decisions. It was not cruel. It was not aggressive. It was simply clear. Dumbledore held his gaze. Then, with something that took effort, he nodded. Very well. Good. Sirius turned back toward the hearing room. The recess is ending. Harry fell into step beside him, and as they walked back in, he said quietly, You didn't fight with him. Didn't need to, Sirius said. He looked. Harry paused. He looked like he was actually listening. Good. Sirius held the door. That's all I wanted. The result came at 4 in the afternoon, and it was not a victory, exactly. Victories in legal proceedings were rarely clean, but it was close enough. The committee, by a vote of 4-1, recommended that the full Wisingamot hear Sirius's case within 21 days. The blood claim was formally recognized as legally operative pending trial outcome. Lord Black's Wisingamot seat was activated immediately. The ministry's capacity to detain him without bail during this period was specifically denied. The one dissenting vote was the minister's representative, which surprised no one. Fudge swept out of the gallery with Percy Weasley trotting behind him and did not make eye contact with Sirius on his way out, which Sirius took as a satisfying indicator of how the afternoon had gone. Amelia Bones, on her way out, paused beside Sirius. Lord Black, she said, in the brisk tone of someone who is communicating far more than her words contain. The evidence regarding Pettigrew, formally submitted before trial, it will carry significantly more weight than informally alleged. I understand, Sirius said. We're working on it. I would suggest working quickly. Her eyes held his for a moment. I was the one who reviewed the imprisonment file when I took this job. 8 years ago. A pause. There was no trial record. I noted it. My note was filed. Nothing happened. She looked at him steadily. I'm sorry it took this long. She walked away without waiting for a response, which was its own kind of grace. Sirius stood in the cleared hearing room with Good and Havo packing up their documents, and Harry sitting on the edge of the table swinging his legs, and he felt the day's accumulation of tension leaving his body like water out of a cracked vessel. We won, Harry said, watching him. We won today, Sirius said. There's more to win. Yeah. Harry hopped off the table. But today counts. It does. Sirius looked at his godson, this boy who'd spent a morning in a legal proceeding being used as a political fact, who had sat through 3 hours of institutional wrangling with his chin up and his eyes sharp, who had spoken to Dumbledore without flinching and eaten ministry biscuits during the recess with the calm appetite of someone who'd decided the day was manageable. It absolutely counts. Remus was waiting in the atrium. He'd been in the gallery but had come down ahead of them, and he was standing by the fountain looking at the magical golden statues with the expression of a man who was composing his reaction and not quite finishing. Harry walked up beside him and looked at the statues too. How do you think it went? Harry asked. Brilliantly, Remus said. Terrifyingly. Brilliantly. He looked at Harry sideways. You were very calm in there. I was listening. You looked like Lily. She used to do that, absolutely still when she was taking things in. Like a recording. He said it simply, not with grief, just as fact. Harry didn't say anything, but something settled in him, visibly, like a key finding a lock. Sirius joined them at the fountain. The 3 of them stood there in the ministry atrium while around them the evening crowd moved and the flow fireplaces flashed, and the great machine of the wizarding bureaucracy ground on, entirely unaware that something significant had just changed in one of its hearing rooms. "Grimmauld Place tomorrow," Sirius said. "It'll need cleaning," Remus said. "It'll need a lot of things." "I can help," Harry said. Sirius looked at him. "I know." He put a hand on Harry's shoulder, the same brief, easy gesture from Privet Drive, but with 3 days of weight behind it now, 3 days of being in the same rooms and sharing the same mornings and building the thing that the gesture was learning to mean. Harry didn't pull away. He leaned into it, just slightly, the tiniest adjustment of weight, the kind of thing that happens when someone decides, not consciously but in the quiet animal part of being a person, that a hand on their shoulder is something they can trust. Sirius felt it, and didn't make anything of it, because some things are only ruined by being noted. They walked out of the ministry together, into the early London evening, Good talking about next steps and Remus asking about dinner and Harry looking up at the sky above the city with the expression of someone getting used to the idea that things can change, that the worst version of your life does not have to be permanent, that a morning can arrive and make the previous 12 years feel like something you survived rather than something you're trapped in. The Wiesengemot trial was 21 days away. Peter Pettigrew was still alive. Voldemort was somewhere gathering strength in the dark. But tonight there was food to find and a city around them and 3 people walking out of a ministry that had just blinked first, and that was enough. That was, for right now, absolutely enough. Chapter 4. The House Number 12, Grimmauld Place revealed itself the way it always had, the houses on either side seeming to inhale, creating a gap where nothing had been, and then the building shouldered its way into existence with the quiet arrogance of something that had always been there, and simply hadn't bothered to show itself before. It was not welcoming. The facade was black stone gone gray with decades of neglect, the front steps cracked and moss-softened, the iron railings along the front rusted to a deep arterial red. The windows were dark in a way that suggested they'd been dark for years and had developed opinions about it. The door knocker was a coiled serpent with its mouth open, frozen mid-strike, tarnished green. Harry stood on the pavement and looked up at it. "Home," Sirius said beside him, and the word came out with a complicated edge to it, not ironic, not quite, but aware of the distance between what a word means and what a place is. "It looks like it's trying to be frightening," Harry said. It was. It was very good at it." Sirius started up the front steps. "My mother used to say the house had its own personality." She meant it as a compliment. "What kind of personality?" "The kind that hexes unexpected guests and locks its own family in specific rooms until they've reflected sufficiently on their choices." He produced the key, old iron black family crest on the bow. "She wasn't wrong, actually. The house has strong opinions and most of them are carved into the wards. We'll be doing some significant renovation." Remus came up the steps behind them with a bag over his shoulder, and the resigned expression of a man who had been inside this house exactly twice, and remembered both occasions clearly, and not fondly. "The portrait," he said. "I know," Sirius said. "Your mother's portrait," Remus clarified, for Harry's benefit. "In the entrance hall." "She's been difficult," Sirius said. "I was going to say screaming," Remus said. "She's been screaming. She's in a permanent stasis that your grandfather put on her specifically so she couldn't be removed." "I know," Sirius said again. "I have a plan." He put the key in the lock. The door swung inward. The entrance hall of number 12, Grimmauld Place, smelled of dust and dark magic and something older than both, the specific scent of a house that had been sealed and left with the memories intact. The wallpaper was dark green and peeling at the corners. The mounted house elf heads along the wall stared glassily at nothing. The gas lamps sputtered awake as they entered, recognizing family magic. At the far end of the hall, the portrait of Wolberga Black occupied the space between 2 doorways like a black hole between stars. She was a heavy-set woman in dark robes with the bearing of someone who had been formidable in life and had not let death change that, and she was currently asleep, the portrait sleep of painted subjects between viewings, still and heavy-lidded. The curtains were drawn across the portrait. Sirius walked past it without looking at it, which was a form of mastery that had clearly been achieved through previous encounter. "Leave the curtains," he said. "She doesn't know we're here yet, and I want to have the basic wards reviewed before I deal with her." "You're going to deal with her," Remus said, the skepticism extremely polite. "I'm going to have a conversation with a painting," Sirius said, moving through the hall into the kitchen. "It's not complicated. She shrieked for 40 minutes solid last time I was here." "I know. I'm going to stop that from being possible." He pushed open the kitchen door. "But first I need to see if the stove still works and whether there's anything salvageable in this house before we start making plans." The kitchen was large and dark and surprisingly intact. The Black family magic had preserved things from physical decay even when aesthetics had been left to rot. The long wooden table was solid. The stove, when Sirius prodded it with his wand, came alive with a grumbling reluctance that suggested it resented being woken but would cooperate. The cold pantry held nothing edible, but the preservation charms on the shelves were still active. Harry had followed them in and was looking around with the assessing expression he was developing, the one that inventoried a space for what it was and what it could be, as distinct from what it currently looked like. "It's big," he said. "Too big," Sirius said. "It was designed for a family of 7 with 6 house elves. We're going to use maybe a third of it, at least to start." Are there bedrooms?" "About 12 that I know of. Possibly more. The house has rooms that open and close based on who's been keyed into the wards. My mother added a new one sometime in the 80s and I found it by accident when I was 17. He opened a cabinet, found it full of dark magic objects that had no business being in a kitchen, and closed it again. Your room is the second floor, end of the corridor. It was my brother's room." He said it without ceremony but with intention. "It gets the morning light." Harry looked at him. "Your brother's?" "Regulus. He died when he was—" Sirius paused. "When he was young. He was a complicated person and I didn't understand him as well as I should have. The room has good light, the bed is large, and it deserves someone living in it." He met Harry's eyes. "You're not haunting anything by being there. You're the opposite of that." Harry nodded slowly. "Okay. Go look at it if you want. Second floor, end of the corridor. You'll know it. The door has a carving of a falcon on it." Harry took his bag and went, and Sirius heard him on the stairs, each footstep careful and exploratory, learning the geography. "That was well handled," Remus said quietly, from beside the stove. "Don't," Sirius said. "I'm just saying." "I know what you're just saying, Mooney." "He found a kettle, spelled it clean, filled it with conjured water." "I'm doing my best. I don't need narration." "Fair enough." Remus came and sat at the kitchen table. "The house needs a great deal of work." "Yes." "The dark objects alone will take weeks to catalog and dispose of." "Yes." "And the Walburga situation?" I said I have a plan. Remus put his elbows on the table. "What is the plan exactly?" Sirius lit the stove, set the kettle on, and turned to look at his oldest friend. "My mother's portrait has a binding that prevents removal. But binding spells are like any lock, they respond to specific keys. In this case, the binding responds to the current lord of the house. Which, as of the blood claim, is me." He crossed his arms. "I can't remove the portrait. But I can modify the binding to include a silencing perimeter. She can scream all she likes inside her own frame. We just won't hear her." Remus stared at him. "Can you do that?" "I did it this morning. When I came in an hour before you." He produced his wand, a new one, purchased from Goods Contacts, holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, not his original wand but responsive enough. The binding took about 20 minutes to modify. I tested it." He paused. "She was very upset." "And we didn't hear it?" "Not a word." Remus was quiet for a moment. Then he started to laugh, properly, the way he used to laugh when they were young and James had done something spectacular, helpless with it. 12 years? He managed. "And your first act in your ancestral home is to soundproof your mother." Priorities. Sirius said, and the corner of his mouth moved. From upstairs came a sound, not alarming, just Harry moving furniture. Then his voice calling down. There's a wardrobe in here that's growling. Don't open it. Sirius called back. A pause. Already opened it. Is it a boggart? Another pause longer. No. There's a box with something in it that's growling. Leave the box. Already moved it to the hallway. Sirius looked at Remus. Remus looked at Sirius. He's going to reorganize the whole house, Remus said. Probably. Sirius agreed, and didn't sound unhappy about it. Creature appeared at 6 in the evening. He materialized in the kitchen doorway with the energy of someone who had been in the walls listening for hours and had finally decided to make a statement about it. He was ancient, far older than house elves were supposed to get, preserved by some combination of black family magic and sheer cantankerous determination, with enormous watery eyes and a face like a very judgmental walnut. He wore what had once been a tea towel marked with the black family crest, and was now primarily distinguishable from a rag by sentiment alone. He looked at Sirius with an expression of absolute loathing. Master has returned, Creature said, in the tone of voice a person uses to describe something they've found in a drain. Hello, Creature, Sirius said. Master is supposed to be in Azkaban. Creature continued, ignoring the greeting. Creature was looking forward to being alone. I'm sure you were. The mistress cried when she learned the master had escaped. The house elf's bulbous eyes moved to Harry and then away, and then back again, with the precision of something that was doing rapid calculations. And who is this? Harry Potter, Sirius said. My ward. He lives here now. The calculations in Creature's eyes intensified. Potter, he said, the name tasting evidently complicated. Potter's mother was a mudblood. Mind your language in this house, Sirius said, and his tone hadn't changed at all, hadn't sharpened, but something in it had solidified in a way that made Creature actually fall silent. Harry is a member of House Black by legal claim. You will treat him accordingly. He held the house elf's eyes. I'm the lord of this house, Creature. You know what that means. Creature did know. The elf's jaw worked briefly, which was apparently the house elf version of extensive internal negotiation. Creature will make dinner, the elf said finally, with extreme sourness. Creature will also show Mr. Potter where the towels are kept and explain which rooms are unsafe without a guide, Sirius said. In a civil manner. Civil, Creature repeated, as if the word offended him on a philosophical level. Yes. Another pause. Creature will do what the lord of the house commands, the elf said, and disappeared with a crack that contained a significant quantity of feelings. Harry watched this exchange with bright attention. He's not happy. He hasn't been happy since 1972, Sirius said. We'll work on it. House elves are deeply bound to their households and Creature's sense of self is entirely wrapped up in the Black family legacy. He's not malicious so much as institutionalized, Remus offered. Yeah. Sirius looked at the doorway where Creature had been. I'm not his mother. I'm not going to fix what 60 years of a particular household produced. But I can set different expectations and enforce them and see what happens. He looked at Harry. The same way I'd expect anyone to be treated in a house I keep. Harry looked at him steadily. Then he picked up his mug. Fair enough. They had dinner in the kitchen because the dining room was in a state that required assessment before use, and the kitchen, once Creature had applied himself to it with the focused energy of a house elf who despite everything cared about the quality of food in his house, produced a meal that was startling in its quality. Roast chicken. Roast potatoes with a crispness that suggested specific elemental attention. Bread that was still warm. Something green that neither Harry nor Sirius could identify but ate anyway because it was excellent. Harry ate with the appetite of someone who had spent several days eating well and was updating their baseline of what meals were supposed to look like. Remus ate and talked, and the two of them fell into a version of the dynamic they built over the school year, professor and student but looser, warmer. The formality dropped along with the school setting, And Sirius sat at the head of his family's table in his family's kitchen and listened and watched and felt something he couldn't quite name settle into the spaces in his ribcage. This was what he'd been running toward, he realized. Not a legal victory, not a political position, not revenge on the ministry. This. A kitchen with people in it. Food on the table. Conversation that had nothing to do with courts or hearings or what happened 12 years ago. Professor Lupin taught me about red caps, Harry was saying. He made one of us face the red cap first, and then we had to work backward through what the spell was doing. Backward? Sirius asked. Yeah, like, he had the spell casting the effect, and we had to figure out what counter it used. So we were learning the mechanics instead of just the incantation. Harry's hands were moving, demonstrating something. It's actually a better way to understand why the spell works. Sirius looked at Remus. That's actually good teaching. I had a good year, Remus said, in the way that means he was trying not to say something about how the year had also been extremely difficult for unrelated reasons involving a monthly physiological event. Are you staying? Harry asked Remus. Here, I mean. Not just tonight. Remus glanced at Sirius. Yes, Sirius said. If he wants to. Remus stopped. I don't want to be in the way of Mooney. Sirius's voice was patient and extremely final. You spent 12 years not being in the way. I'm asking you to be in the way now. That's different. Remus was quiet for a moment. The lamplight caught the gray at his temples, the lines around his eyes, the scars, faint ones, but there, along his jaw. He looked tired in the deep way that has nothing to do with sleep. Yes, he said. If that's actually yes. Good, Harry said, and went back to the potatoes with the decisive energy of someone who'd been hoping for that answer, and is glad to have it settled. The letter from Narcissa Malfoy arrived the next morning. It arrived by an owl that was clearly very expensive, and very well trained, and had the energy of something that expected doors to be opened for it. It landed on the kitchen table beside Sirius's tea and regarded him with cool amber eyes until he took the letter, at which point it departed without waiting for a response, which was its own kind of message. The letter was written on heavy cream parchment in a hand that was careful and precise and had been taught at significant expense. Lord Black, I am writing to acknowledge the blood claim and your reassumption of the house lordship. The appropriate response under Black family tradition is a formal recognition of the change in house leadership, which I offer herewith. I also write with a more personal purpose. We have not spoken in many years, and the circumstances of our family, the choices made by various of its members in recent decades, have created distances between us that I do not intend to address all at once. However, I believe we have interests in common. I would like to speak with you at your earliest convenience. I propose tea, at a neutral location, in the near future. I do not come with agendas I am not willing to state plainly. That is all I will say for now. Narcissa Malfoy Black. Sirius read it twice. Then he handed it to Remus, who read it, and raised his eyebrows in a way that asked several questions simultaneously. She's recognizing the lordship, Sirius said. She's also doing something else, Remus said. The phrasing. Interests in common. That's careful. Narcissa has always been careful. Sirius leaned back in his chair. She married Lucius because she thought it was the right alliance, not because she was wild about him. She's been in a marriage to a Death Eater for 15 years with a son who's being shaped by it, and she's smart enough to see where that road goes. You think she wants out? I think she's looking at the chessboard and seeing that her position isn't as stable as she thought. He picked up his tea. I'll see her. Harry came in from the hallway with a box of dark objects that had been in the drawing room, which he'd apparently been cataloging since 6 in the morning. Someone's writing to you? He said, looking at the letter on the table. Narcissa Malfoy, Sirius said. Your. He thought about the exact relationship. Draco Malfoy's mother. My cousin. Harry's face did something specific. Malfoy's mother is writing to you. She's a Black. She recognizes the lordship. He watched Harry set down the box. She wants to meet. And you're going to? Yes. Harry pulled out a chair and sat down, looking at the box. Malfoy was terrible to Hermione this year, he said. He called her. He stopped. A mudblood. I know what that means, Sirius said quietly. And I know it's not nothing. Narcissa isn't Draco, Remus said. She raised him, Harry said without heat. Just observational. She made choices about how he was raised. True, Sirius said. Also true that people make choices inside situations that limit them, and then sometimes they look for the door. He met Harry's eyes. I'm not forgiving anything. I'm getting information and seeing what she actually wants. I won't make commitments I can't keep or decisions that hurt people who matter to me. He held Harry's gaze. Including you. If this meeting produces something useful, we'll talk about it. If it doesn't, she stays at arm's length. Harry looked at him. Nodded once. Okay. Also, Sirius added, you should probably tell me more about Draco Malfoy. Not right now. But at some point. He's awful, Harry said helpfully. That's a start. The meeting with Narcissa happened 3 days later, in a private room at the Ritz that Goods Network had quietly arranged. It was neutral in the sense that neither of them owned it, and both of them could leave whenever they chose, and it had very good tea, which mattered. Narcissa Black, Malfoy, had not changed as much as Sirius expected. She was still the precise, contained woman he remembered from Black family gatherings before everything went wrong, pale blonde, beautiful in the architectural way of people who have been told since childhood that their appearance is important, and have never entirely stopped performing it. But there were things around her eyes now. Compressed things. The look of someone maintaining a posture for reasons they've had to remind themselves of recently. She sat across the small table from Sirius, and looked at him with the composed neutrality of a woman who had prepared extensively for this conversation. You look better than the newspapers suggested, she said. That's a low bar, Sirius said. True. She picked up her tea. How are you, actually? He considered pretending she wasn't asking a genuine question. Decided against it. Working on it. She nodded. Something in her shoulders, very slightly, released. The blood claim was brilliant, she said. I mean that without irony. I'd forgotten the Ius Antiquum existed until I read the Prophet, and then I went through Grandfather Arcturus's notes and found the reference. She looked at him steadily. You always were the one who read the things nobody expected you to read. You always were the one who noticed things other people didn't, he said. What are you noticing now, Narcissa? She was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, Piccadilly moved and shone in the afternoon light. Lucius is committed, she said. Fully, genuinely committed. That's not going to change. She said it plainly, without apparent emotion, the way someone states a weather forecast. Draco is being shaped in Lucius's image, and it's working, and She stopped. Looked at her tea. I chose this path when I was 16 and I understood what it meant, and I don't get to complain about it now. But, Sirius said. But the Dark Lord is not gone, Narcissa said. He was weakened. He wasn't destroyed. And when he returns, and I believe he will return, Sirius, I genuinely believe this, the people most loyal to him will be expected to pay the price of that loyalty in a very specific currency. She met his eyes. I am not afraid for myself. I am afraid for Draco. The room was quiet. What do you want from me? Sirius asked. I want to know what side you're building, she said. Not the Ministry's side. I have no faith in Fudge and neither do you. Not Dumbledore's side exactly, because Dumbledore's side requires a kind of trust that I don't think either of us is positioned to offer him. Your side. The House Black side. She tilted her head slightly. You have a Wisengamot seat. You have the Potter boy. You have Dumbledore's attention and the Ministry's fear and the legal standing to make both of those things matter. You're building something. I'm getting my godson settled, Sirius said. Yes. And also building something. She didn't push it. I'm not asking to join it. I'm asking to know it exists. Sirius looked at her. This woman who'd married Lucius Malfoy at 16 in the full understanding of what that household was and had lived inside it for 15 years with the grace of someone who'd made their choice and intended to honor it. Who was sitting across from him now not asking for rescue. She wasn't that kind of woman, but for a fact. A piece of information about the shape of the world. It exists, he said. Something changed in her face. Very small. Very quick. Draco doesn't have to be what they've made him, she said. No, Sirius agreed. People can change. Some of them. He's 15, she said. He's 15 and he's already so much like Lucius that She stopped. Her hand, holding the teacup, was very still. I don't know if there's still room to change the direction. There might be, Sirius said. But that depends on choices Draco makes, not on what you arrange for him. You can't decide who he becomes. A pause. Believe me, I know. I had a mother with very strong opinions about who I was going to be. Narcissa looked at him. And then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a short, genuine sound, nothing performed about it. Yes. You did. The laugh faded but left something warmer. She was dreadful. She really was, Sirius agreed. They talked for another hour, and it was not comfortable exactly. There was too much history between them and the Black family name had too many sharp edges, but it was honest. She told him things about Death Eater activity in the previous year, small things, nothing that compromised Lucius directly, but patterns and movements that Sirius filed carefully. He told her nothing he wasn't willing for Lucius to potentially hear, because she was honest but she was also married to the man. When they left, she paused at the door. The boy, she said. Harry. Is he remarkable? Sirius said without hesitation. She studied him. You sound like a parent. He held her gaze. Yeah, he said. I suppose I do. Harry was in the drawing room when Sirius returned, sitting cross-legged on the floor surrounded by dark objects arranged in careful groups, which he had apparently categorized by type with the assistance of a Black family artifact reference book he'd found in the study. Remus was in the corner, reading, with the occasional advisory comment. Creature hovered in the doorway with an expression of outrage that nobody appeared to require his assistance. How'd it go? Harry asked, without looking up from a bronze orb he was examining with the careful attention of someone who has learned to look before touching. Interesting, Sirius said. Is she going to be a problem? No. She might actually be useful. He sat down on the floor near Harry, ignoring the available armchairs in the way he'd always found floor-sitting more conducive to honest conversation. She's worried about Draco. Harry considered this. She should be, he said. He's on the wrong trajectory. He's 15. I know. That's the problem. He's 15 and he already believes all of it. Harry set down the bronze orb. Do you know he carried the Dark Arts Primer by Selwyn this year? Like, voluntarily? Ron found it in his bag. That's concerning. Yeah. Harry picked up the next object, examined it, placed it in the Category 3 group. I'm not saying there's no hope. I'm saying whoever intervenes needs to do it soon. Sirius looked at his godson, sitting on the drawing room floor of the ancient and noble House of Black, cataloging dark objects by category with the focused efficiency of someone who had found a task and was executing it. 13 years old. Never taught to be curious about magic, just naturally was, the way his mother had been, the way James had been in a different direction. Have you eaten? Sirius asked. Creature brought biscuits at 2. Harry said. Creature, from the doorway, made a sound that indicated this was technically accurate but was being described in an uncharitable manner. Right. Sirius stood. I'm making dinner. Actual dinner. Harry looked up. You can cook? My mother threw me out at 16. I had to learn. He headed for the door. Come help. This is a life skill and you're going to have it. Harry scrambled up from the floor, stepping over the organized categories of dark objects with precise care. Remus put his book down, looked at the ceiling, and smiled at something only he could see. "Remus," Sirius called from the hallway. "You too. This is a family dinner." A pause. Then Remus set his book down and stood up. They cooked pasta badly and then fixed it by improvising with herbs from a garden that turned out to exist behind the house and was overrun but functional. Creature watched from the doorway with the sustained horror of a house elf witnessing people prepare their own food, and occasionally, when he couldn't help himself, corrected their technique with audible reluctance, and by the end was essentially directing operations while maintaining the fiction that he was merely commenting. Harry caught Sirius's eye over this at some point, and the look they exchanged was brief and wordless and entirely understood. They ate at the kitchen table. The house was still dark and full of complicated history, and needed months of work. The drawing room had a pile of dark objects sorted into categories. Somewhere upstairs, the portrait of Olberga Black was silently furious in her silence frame. The Wisengamot trial was 2.5 weeks away. Peter Pettigrew was in Scotland in a castle and knew none of this was coming. But the kitchen was warm and the food was good, and Remus was telling a story about the time James had enchanted Slughorn's chair to recite poetry whenever sat in and had somehow not been caught for 3 weeks, and Harry was laughing, the real laugh, the sudden and undefended one, and Sirius was sitting at the head of the table in the house he'd grown up in and hated and fled and inherited and was learning, slowly, to reclaim. This was it. This was the thing he'd held on to in Azkaban when the Dementors came. Not revenge, not even justice exactly, but this. People around a table. Food. Laughter that nobody had planned. He'd thought it was a memory. A thing from before. It turned out it was still possible. It turned out you could lose everything and come back and build the thing again from the ground up with different materials, and it would be different, yes. It would carry the weight of everything that had happened to make it necessary, but it would also be real. It would be more real, maybe, for having been impossible for so long. Outside, London moved around Grimmauld Place, unaware. The old house breathed in and out with the settling sounds of a building getting used to being lived in again. The gas lamps threw amber light across the table. Harry laughed again at something Remus said, and Sirius watched him, and thought, there he is. There's the person he was supposed to get to be. And then he reached over and helped himself to more pasta, because you couldn't hold a moment and live in it at the same time, and living in it was the point. Chapter 5. The Training. The first morning Harry found Sirius in the back garden at 5:30. He thought something was wrong. He'd woken early, old habit from Privet Drive, where sleeping past 6 meant missing the only quiet hour before the Dursleys filled the house with their noise, and had come downstairs to find the kitchen empty and the back door open, and had followed the open door out into the grey pre-dawn garden where Sirius was standing in the overgrown grass in his shirt sleeves, wand drawn, working through something. Not dueling practice. Not exactly. It was more deliberate than that, a sequence of movements, each one precise and controlled, the wand tracing specific arcs in the air. No incantations. Just form. Like watching someone practice the skeleton of spellwork with the flesh of the magic stripped away so you could see the bones clearly. Harry stood in the doorway and watched. Sirius moved through the sequence twice, then stopped, stood still for a moment, and said without turning around, "You're letting the heat out." Harry stepped out and pulled the door mostly closed behind him. The garden smelled of damp earth and the herbs that creature had quietly begun maintaining once he'd determined that the humans were not going to stop using the garden, and he might as well have opinions about its condition. The sky above the walls was pale and going lighter in the east. "What is that?" Harry asked. "Foundational form work." Sirius turned to look at him. "Your wand arm is only as precise as the muscle memory underneath it. Most wizards never train that specifically. They learn incantations and brute force the movements until they work well enough." He looked Harry over. "How's your wand arm?" Harry considered. "It works." "Show me something." "Anything." Harry raised his wand. "Expelliarmus." The spell shot from his wand and hit the garden wall with a crack that probably woke Remus on the first floor. Clean, fast, well aimed. Sirius looked at where it had hit. Then at Harry's arm. Then at his grip. Your elbow drops on the release, he said. It's costing you about 30% of your accuracy at distance. At close range it doesn't matter, but at range it compounds. Harry looked at his own arm. I've been hitting what I aim at. At Hogwarts distances, sure. Sirius came over and adjusted Harry's elbow with 2 fingers, a small correction. Try it again. Harry tried it again. The spell hit 6 inches higher and 2 inches tighter. Feel the difference? Sirius asked. Harry opened and closed his hand. Yeah. Good. That's where we start. Sirius stepped back. Do it 50 times. Same target, same adjustment, until it stops being something you think about and becomes something your arm does on its own. Harry looked at the wall. Then at Sirius. 50? 50. I'll be in the kitchen making tea. Come in when you're done. He went inside. Harry turned back to the wall. He did 50. This became the shape of their mornings. 5:30, garden, whatever Sirius had decided they were working on that day. Sometimes it was physical, form work, wand positioning, the mechanics of casting that nobody taught at Hogwarts because the curriculum assumed natural talent would sort itself out. Sometimes it was conceptual, Sirius pulling out old Auror training materials and walking Harry through the theory of magical combat, which was substantially more complex than the theory of magical academics. Hogwarts teaches you spells, Sirius said one morning, sitting on the low wall at the garden's edge with a mug while Harry practiced. What it doesn't teach you, mostly, is how spells interact. How one spell creates an opening for another. How you read what someone's about to cast from their body language before they cast it. That's what Aurors learn. Harry asked. 2nd year of training. Sirius confirmed. But there's no reason you can't learn it now. He set his mug down. Cast at me. Harry turned. What? Cast at me. Whatever you want. I'll block. I'll hurt you. You won't. Sirius raised his wand. Try. Harry tried. Expelliarmus, fast and aimed well, elbow corrected. Sirius deflected it with a movement that was so economical it was almost invisible, a small redirect that sent the spell into the wall without Sirius moving more than his wrist. Again, Sirius said. Harry tried stupefy. Same result. Then a combination, Expelliarmus immediately followed by impedimenta, and Sirius blocked both with 2 fluid motions, redirecting each without fully countering either, so that both spells ended up hitting the wall in close succession. You telegraphed the second one, Sirius said. How? Your left shoulder. It drops slightly before you switch spells. Most people have a tell like that, something physical they do in the half-second before they cast. Once you know someone's tell, you know what's coming. He lowered his wand. What's mine? Harry stared at him. I don't. I've been trying to hit you, not watch. That's the problem. Sirius raised his wand again. Watch me first. Don't cast. Just watch. Harry lowered his wand and watched. Sirius cast 6 different spells in sequence at the garden wall, nothing lethal, just practice-grade charms, and Harry watched the way his body prepared each one. It took 3 or 4 before he started seeing it. A slight shift in his weight forward before aggressive spells. A micro-adjustment in his chin upward before anything requiring distance precision. Your weight, Harry said. You come forward before an attack spell. Sirius stopped. Looked at him. And your chin goes up for distance work. Harry added. A pause. That's one of them. Sirius said. There's a third. Harry watched him cast 2 more times. Your left hand, he said. The one not holding the wand. The fingers tighten before you do anything that requires significant power. Sirius lowered his wand. Your mother, he said, could read people's casting tells after one exchange. I've had trained Aurors take 3 sessions to find one. He picked up his tea. Now we work on hiding yours. Remus taught in a different way. Where Sirius was systematic, building from mechanical foundations upward, Remus approached things sideways, through problems that required understanding rather than technique. He'd come into the drawing room on the fourth morning of this arrangement with a stack of books and a mildly guilty expression. "I'm not supposed to be teaching defense outside of school," he said. "Technically. The ministry has guidelines." "Are you going to anyway?" Harry asked. "Obviously." Remus sat down. "But you're going to understand why what we're doing works, not just that it does." "That's non-negotiable." He opened one of the books. Patronus first. "Where are you with it?" "Partial. Silver vapor. I can hold it for about 10 seconds. "Show me." Harry raised his wand. Expecto Patronum. Silver mist erupted from the wand tip, substantial and luminous, filling half the drawing room. It held for 7 seconds before thinning and dissolving. Remus leaned forward. "What memory are you using?" "First time flying." "That's a good memory." "But it's," Remus thought. "It's excitement." "Joy, yes, but the kind that's a relief. The kind that says I'm good at something. That's strong, but it's also slightly anxious underneath it, because it's tethered to the question of whether you're good enough." He met Harry's eyes. "You need something with no question in it. Something that's just, full." Harry was quiet. He turned his wand over in his hands. "I don't know if I have one of those." "You've had a few since Thursday," Remus said. Harry looked at him. Then at the wall. Then he raised his wand. Expecto Patronum. The silver mist came again, but this time it was different, denser, with a direction to it, a coherence. It didn't hold a form exactly, but it moved with intention, sweeping through the room and not dissolving. It held for 23 seconds, and when it faded it did so gradually rather than all at once. Remus was very still. "What did you use?" he asked. Harry's jaw worked slightly. "Pasta," he said. Remus blinked. "Sorry?" "We made pasta. 2 nights ago. In the kitchen." Harry looked at his wand. I wasn't thinking about anything. It was just dinner, and Creature was being terrible about it, and Sirius was." He stopped. "It was just good. No question underneath it." He looked at Remus. "Is that enough? A pasta dinner?" Remus's eyes were doing the thing they did when he was feeling more than he was planning to express. "It is absolutely enough," he said. "The Patronus doesn't care about the size of the memory. It cares about the quality of the feeling." He picked up one of his books, more to give his hands something to do than because he needed it. "Do it again." They spent 2 hours on it. By the end, Harry's Patronus had taken partial form. The silver mist was consistently condensing toward a shape, though it hadn't fully resolved. Remus watched it with the concentrated attention of a man who understood both the magic and what it meant for the person casting it. "It's nearly there," Remus said. "The shape is almost certain. It just needs the memory to be more established." "The memory's only a week old," Harry said. "Yes," Remus said. "Give it time." Sirius received the Wisengamot trial date confirmation on a Wednesday morning, 9 days away, full hearing, all rights accorded to the accused under ancient house privilege. Good had won the procedural argument about committee versus full hearing, which meant the entire Wisengamot, or the significant majority of it, would be present. That meant witnesses, official record, and the full weight of whatever verdict came down. It also meant that whatever evidence they had about Peter Pettigrew needed to be airtight before then. Sirius sat at the kitchen table with the confirmation in one hand and a cup of tea in the other and thought about the problem of Peter Pettigrew, which was primarily the problem of proving that a man everyone believed was dead was actually a rat hiding in a castle in Scotland. Remus came in and read the confirmation over his shoulder. 9 days. 9 days. We need Peter before then, or at least before. We need his existence on record as evidence I can present. Sirius set down the confirmation. Dumbledore needs to know about Scabbers. He probably already suspects, Remus said. He suspects most things. Suspecting and having it confirmed aren't the same. Sirius stood. I've been putting off the Dumbledore conversation. I can't anymore. He wrote the letter that morning. Not long. Sirius had never been a long letter writer, which James had always complained about, just the essential facts. Pettigrew is alive. He's been in Hogwarts as a rat named Scabbers for 12 years. This is the evidence I'm bringing to the trial. I need your confirmation of what you know and when you knew it. Come to Grimmauld Place. He sent it and then went back to the garden, because thinking was easier when his body was doing something, and spent an hour working through advanced shielding forms until Dumbledore's all came back with a response that was, for Dumbledore, unusually brief. I'll come tonight. Dumbledore arrived at 8, and the house received him with the particular energy of a building that remembered him and was withholding judgment. Sirius met him at the door. They shook hands, a thing that carried a complicated history, and Sirius showed him through to the study, which was the most neutral room in the house, not carrying the weight of the dining room or the intimacy of the kitchen. Harry was in the study already, which Sirius had asked him to be. Not as a political tool this time, just because Harry deserved to hear this conversation directly, and Sirius was done with the habit of having important discussions about Harry in Harry's absence. Dumbledore settled into the chair across from the desk with the ease of a man who was comfortable in any room he entered, which was either a quality of character or a quality of control, and Sirius had never been entirely certain which. He looked at Harry. You look well, Harry, he said. You said that at the ministry, Harry said. It's been true both times. The blue eyes moved to Sirius. You wanted to discuss Pettigrew. Peter is alive, Sirius said. He wasn't going to pat it. He's been in Hogwarts as Ron Weasley's pet rat for 12 years. His name appears on the Marauders map, Harry confirmed it, and Remus confirmed it independently when he identified Scabbers on the map this year. He held Dumbledore's gaze. What do you know? Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Not evasive, considering. I have suspected that Peter survived for approximately 3 years, he said. I did not have confirmation. What made you suspect? Several things over time. The body was never recovered, though the physical evidence was consistent with death. Peter was a skilled enough wizard to have staged it, if he chose, which I underweight at the time because I underestimated him. He paused. I also, eventually, came to doubt the evidence against you, Sirius. Not because I found proof of innocence, but because the evidence of guilt was simpler than I'd expected. You were never simple. You could have said something, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him. Yes, he said without qualifying it. I could have. I chose caution over action, and in this case caution was a mistake. He looked back at Sirius. What do you intend to do about Peter? Present his existence as evidence at the trial. Demonstrate that I couldn't have committed the crime I was imprisoned for because the primary victim is alive. Sirius leaned on the desk. But I need him actually apprehended. Evidence of his existence is one thing, having him is another. He's in the castle, Dumbledore said. Can you get him? A pause. Getting a specific rat in a building the size of Hogwarts is not straightforward. He'd flee the moment he sensed a genuine search. He studied Sirius. If Scabbers is brought to me, if someone finds and brings him, I can verify the animagus form through a revealing spell. That's confirmed evidence. We need more than that, Sirius said. We need him forced to transform. In front of witnesses. That can be arranged, Dumbledore said slowly. If we know where he is. The map would show his location, but Harry has the map, Sirius said. Everyone looked at Harry. Harry was already reaching into his robe pocket. They planned it that evening, the four of them around the kitchen table, Sirius and Dumbledore and Remus and Harry, and the strangeness of that particular configuration was not lost on any of them. Four people who had each, in different ways, been failed by the same sequence of events, sitting in the house of the Black family working on the same problem. Creature brought tea without being asked, which Sirius noted and filed as evidence of progress. The plan required Ron. Ron who had Scabbers, or had had him, Or rather, Scabbers had been replaced by a different rat, which itself was an interesting development worth examining. Remus confirmed that during the year Crookshanks had been after Scabbers persistently, which in retrospect looked less like cat and rat instinct and more like a half-nasal identifying an animagus. "We need Ron to cooperate without explaining everything immediately," Harry said. "He'll believe me. He'll help. But I need to talk to him first." He looked at Sirius. "Can I write to him?" "Write to him," Sirius said. "But carefully. Don't mention Peter specifically in writing. I'll say I need to see him. He'll come." Harry paused. "His family might be an issue. His dad is in the ministry. Arthur Weasley is in the ministry, but Arthur Weasley is not the ministry," Remus said. "He's a decent man. Tell Ron to come here," Sirius said. "Bring Hermione too, if you want her. The more people who can witness Peter's transformation, the better." He looked at Dumbledore. "Can you come to Grimmauld Place when it happens? For the witness verification." "Yes," Dumbledore said simply. No conditions. No caveats. It was, Sirius thought, a version of Dumbledore he could work with. Ron and Hermione arrived 2 days later. Ron came through the flow looking wary. Sirius Black's house, obviously, and then saw Sirius and had the expression of someone whose nervous system was trying several responses at once. He was tall for 13, with red hair that was currently doing several things, and he had the look of someone who'd made his best friend a priority so completely that his friend's safety registered in his face before his own comfort did. Hermione was behind him with a bag that was packed with the thoroughness of someone who decided to be prepared for anything and had specific ideas about what anything might include. She looked at Sirius with the expression of someone cross-referencing him against 12 years of history of magic lessons, finding the data incomplete, and deciding to withhold judgment pending further information. "Harry," Ron said, getting that out of the way first. "Ron," Harry said. "Thanks for coming." "Yeah." Ron looked around the entrance hall, at the mounted house elf heads and the peeling wallpaper, and the general atmosphere of a house that took its history extremely seriously. "This is, yeah? Okay." He looked at Sirius. "You're hi." "Hello?" Sirius said. "Thank you for coming." Harry said it was important. It's always important with Harry. He said it with the flat fondness of someone who had calibrated to a friend who generated unusual situations and had decided that was fine. He looked at Harry. "What's going on?" "Let's sit down," Harry said. "It's about Scabbers." Ron's expression shifted. "Scabbers is gone. Crookshanks got, no," Harry said. "Scabbers isn't dead. Scabbers ran." He held Ron's eyes. "Sit down, Ron. This is going to take a few minutes." Ron took it better than expected and worse than hoped, which was in the end pretty much exactly what you'd expect from someone being told that a pet they'd had for 9 years was actually a human being who had faked his death and hidden as a rat to avoid being prosecuted for betraying Harry's parents. He didn't shout. He went through several colors of face and sat very still, and Hermione put her hand on his arm at some point, and he let her. "He was in my family for 12 years, Ron said when Harry finished. "Yeah," Harry said. "He slept in my bed." "Yeah." A pause. "That's disgusting," Ron said with feeling. "Yeah," Harry agreed. "Okay." Ron sat up straighter. The red in his face had settled into something more useful, a specific and focused anger that had found its direction. "What do we do?" "We need him apprehended," Sirius said. "We have a theory about his location, but we need the map to confirm it. And then we need someone he knows and trusts to find him." "He knows me," Ron said without enthusiasm. "He knows you," Sirius confirmed. "We're not asking you to confront him alone. Not even close. We need you to locate him on the map and lead us to him." He looked at Ron steadily. "It's your call. You don't have to do any of this." Ron looked at Harry. Harry looked back. "He was there the night your parents died," Ron said. "Yes," Harry said. Ron stood up. "Where's the map?" They used the map in the study, unfolded on the desk with everyone crowded around it. Harry activated it with his wand. I solemnly swear that I am up to no good, and the ink spread across the parchment in its familiar spider web of corridors and rooms and moving labeled dots. Hogwarts was far away, but the map was a living document, its information real-time, which had always been one of its more extraordinary properties. The founders of the map had never fully explained how it maintained its connection to the castle's magical structure across distance, but it did, reliably, which meant that Peter Pettigrew, if he was in Hogwarts, would appear as a labeled dot. They searched the map in silence. Every corridor. Every room. The grounds. The greenhouses, the dungeons, the towers. He wasn't there. Harry straightened. He's not in the castle. He ran, Remus said, when he sensed the search beginning. How would he know? Ron started. Animagi are sensitive, Sirius said. He was staring at the map. He can feel shifts in intent, the way some animals can. If Dumbledore's awareness shifted toward him, if we started the search before we were ready, he's been hiding for 12 years, Remus said quietly. He's very good at knowing when to run. The room was quiet. The trial is in 7 days, Good said from the doorway, where he'd appeared with his inevitable folder. Without Pettigrew physically present, we have other evidence, Sirius said. His voice was steady. The map shows he existed in the castle under his real name for 12 years. Remus can testify to identifying him. Dumbledore can testify to the animagus verification process. He turned away from the desk. We build the case from what we have. We catch Peter after, when he has nowhere to hide because the truth is already on record. Harry was looking at the map, still. At the place where Peter should have been and wasn't. He's going to Voldemort, Harry said. Everyone looked at him. He's been hiding from Sirius for 12 years, Harry said. Sirius escaped and now Sirius has legal standing and there's a trial coming. The only protection Peter has now is Voldemort. He looked at Sirius. He's going to him. Or trying to. The room was very, very quiet. Which means Voldemort gets a servant who can restore him, Sirius said slowly. Before the trial happens, Harry said. Sirius looked at Remus. Remus looked at him. Between them passed the understanding of people who had been through the last war and knew exactly what Peter helping Voldemort meant. We keep building the case, Sirius said. The trial goes forward. And we tell Dumbledore about the timeline tonight. He looked at Harry. You were right about that. The moment Peter left the castle, the clock changed. Harry nodded. He folded the map closed. How much time do we have? Ron asked. Enough, Sirius said. Whether or not that was true, he said it with the conviction of a man who had decided that was the only acceptable answer. The training shifted after that. Not in intensity, it had always been intense, but in focus. Sirius stopped the foundational work and moved to application. Real scenarios, rapid casting, the kind of practice that assumed an opponent who was neither stationary nor cooperative. He and Harry faced each other across the garden in the evenings, and Harry came at him with everything he had, and Sirius blocked and redirected and occasionally let things through just enough to demonstrate what it felt like to have your defense breach. By the 4th session, Harry had found a rhythm that was distinctly his own. Fast, instinctive, adaptable, he didn't have the raw power that some wizards developed in their late teens, but he had something that was in some ways more useful. The ability to read a situation mid-cast and adjust before the spell left his wand. That was rare. Most wizards committed to their intention before the magic moved. Harry somehow held his options open until the last possible moment. Sirius told him this after a session that had ended with Harry actually getting a disarming spell past Sirius's defense at full strength, an event that had sent Sirius's wand across the garden. I don't know how I do that, Harry said. The best things you can do, you usually don't, Sirius said, picking up his wand. Your mother was the same. She could hold a spell's intention fluid until the actual moment of release. She used to say it was just feeling what the situation needed. He dusted off his wand. Tactically, it makes you very difficult to anticipate. Harry turned his wand over. We need to talk about the Patronus, he said. We're not done with the Patronus? Sirius asked. It's taken a shape, Harry said. He raised his wand. Expecto Patronum. The silver erupted from his wand, and this time it had form, complete, defined, certain. A stag. Full-sized, fully realized, moving through the garden with the particular quality of something that was both luminous and genuine, antlers catching the evening light, each step deliberate and unhurried. Sirius stood very still. The stag walked to the end of the garden and dissolved slowly into silver mist, and then into nothing. The garden was quiet. Oh, Sirius said, which was not a complete sentence but was the only thing available. I know, Harry said. He was looking at where the stag had been. I know whose it is. Sirius cleared his throat. James would have. He stopped. Started again. He would have been absolutely insufferable about it, he said. He'd have pointed it out every 10 minutes for the rest of the year. Would he? Harry said. And there it was, the question underneath the question. Tell me about my father. Tell me what he'd have done. He would have called it the best Patronus in the history of patronuses, and he'd have been wrong because he'd have been biased, and he'd have asked you to cast it at least 40 more times just to watch. Sirius's voice was steady. He'd have been so proud of you he couldn't have stood it. Harry looked at the garden wall where the stag had dissolved. Would he have done the blood claim thing? He asked. What you did? The law stuff. Would he have done that? In a heartbeat, Sirius said. Slower than me, because he'd have tried to talk to everyone first and find the diplomatic solution. But when the diplomatic solution ran out, yes. He'd have turned every legal mechanism available to him inside out before he let anyone put you somewhere you shouldn't be. He held Harry's gaze. You come from people who fight for the ones they love, Harry. It's in you. I can see it every time you cast. Harry looked at him. The garden was going dark around them, the sky above the walls deepening into blue. I don't want to lose anyone else, Harry said. It came out direct and plain, not performed, the kind of honesty that arrives when someone forgets to protect themselves for a moment. When Voldemort comes back, and he's coming back, I know he is, I don't want. He stopped. Pressed his lips together. I've lost enough. Yeah, Sirius said. So have I. So we have to be ready. Yes. Not just good. Actually ready. Yes. Sirius looked at his godson in the darkening garden, this boy who had grown up in a cupboard and learned to fly and watched people die and kept going, who was 13 years old and was already looking at the future war with the clear eyes of someone who intended to meet it prepared. Which is why we don't stop. Harry raised his wand. Expecto Patronum. The stag came again, brighter in the dark. Again, Sirius said. Again. Again. The lights in the kitchen behind them came on, warm and amber, and somewhere inside Creature was making dinner with grumbling but genuine application, and Remus was probably reading, and the trial was 6 days away, and Peter Pettigrew was somewhere running toward a darkness that was gathering strength in a way that couldn't be stopped, only prepared for. But here, in the garden of Grimmauld Place, a boy and his godfather were working in the last of the light, and the silver stag walked back and forth across the overgrown grass, each pass more certain than the last, and the night came down around them slowly, and neither of them stopped. Chapter 6. The war begins early. The trial was 4 days away when the wards broke. Not all of them. Not the deep ones. The ancient black family protections that had been embedded in the stone and soil of Grimmauld Place for 2 centuries were not the kind of thing that broke quietly or partially. Those held. But the outer perimeter wards, the ones that detected approach and intent and the specific magical signature of dark arts, those didn't so much break as shatter, all at once, at 2:17 in the morning, with the sound of a bell that wasn't quite a bell, more like a frequency, felt in the chest rather than heard through ears. Sirius was awake before it finished. He was across the landing and knocking on Harry's door in the same motion, already dressed because he'd fallen asleep in his clothes, which had been happening more as the trial approached and his sleep had gotten lighter and more watchful without him entirely meaning it to. Harry opened the door before Sirius knocked twice. He was dressed too, trousers, shoes, wand in hand, and his eyes were fully alert in a way that said he'd been awake already, or nearly. "I felt it," Harry said. "The outer ward. Someone with dark intent crossed the detection perimeter." Sirius kept his voice low and even. 2, possibly 3. "Remus is on the second floor." "I know. I heard him move." They went down the hallway together. Remus was already at the top of the stairs, transformed in posture, the quietly tired professor entirely gone, replaced by something older and sharper. "Direction?" Remus asked. "North side of the building," Sirius said. "Which means they came through the alley." He handed Remus his spare wand, a black family emergency piece from the study, old ash, inflexible, but workable. "Harry, stay between us." "I'm not staying anywhere," Harry said. Sirius looked at him. Not a long look, there wasn't time for a long look, but a specific one. A look that said, "I know, and also we're going to discuss what staying between us actually means in the next 10 seconds. Between us means in the fight," Sirius said. "Not behind us. Between. You cover the angles we can't." Harry's jaw relaxed. "Yes." "Good." Sirius moved down the stairs. The ground floor of Grimmauld Place was dark, the gas lamps turned down to almost nothing, and the house itself had a quality Sirius remembered from childhood, an alertness that came when the wards were active, like the building was breathing differently. The portraits in the hallway had all retreated to the edges of their frames. Even Walburga, soundless in her silence portrait, had shifted to the far corner of her canvas with an expression that was not her usual fury but something more self-preserving. Creature appeared at Sirius's elbow from nowhere, as house elves did. "There are 3 of them," Creature said without preamble. His enormous eyes were fully black, pupils dilated, every trace of domestic grumbling stripped away. Underneath all the sourness, the old elf was a creature of this house, and the house was his as much as it was Sirius's, and something in his bearing said he knew it. "They came through the alley. They have a key." "A key," Sirius repeated. "A black family key. Old one. Someone gave it to them." A pause. "Not the mistress." "Before the mistress." The elf's hands were tight at his sides. "Creature knows this house's magic. They used old magic to get past the outer ward. They know what they're doing." "Can you tell who they are?" Remus asked. "Dark wizards," Creature said, with the flat certainty of a creature who had lived next to dark magic his entire life and knew exactly what it smelled like. "One of them has been here before." Creature remembers his magic. "He was here in the old days, when the Dark Lord's people came to meet with the Master's associates." Sirius looked at Remus. "Death Eaters," Harry said quietly. Sirius didn't confirm it because it didn't need confirming. He moved to the window that faced the north side of the building and looked out through the gap in the heavy curtain at the alley alongside. Nothing visible. But the ward was still active, still ringing low in his chest, which meant they were close. "They're waiting," he said. "They didn't break in, they triggered the outer ward and they're waiting for us to open the door." He turned. "Which means they want us in the open." "A drought," Remus said. "Or they know the internal wards are stronger than they can manage and they want us to come to them." Sirius thought fast. The front door was too exposed. The back garden had the old wards stronger, but the garden wall had 2 points of potential breach. Remus. "Back garden, right wall. There's a section near the herb beds where the ward is newer. I repaired it 2 weeks ago and it hasn't fully set. I'll cover it," Remus said and moved. "Harry." Sirius looked at him. "I need you on the upper landing with a sight line to the front door. If they breach the front entrance, you're the second line. Not the first, but not standing back. You hit them hard and you hit them clean and you don't stop to see if it worked." Harry held his gaze. What are you doing? Going out the front. Sirius raised a hand before Harry could respond. Not in the open. Through the concealment ward. I'm going to get behind them. A short pause. That's a significant risk, Harry said, with the specific flatness of someone who is not saying please don't but is thinking it. It's a calculated one. Sirius checked his wand. They're expecting defense. They're not expecting offense from outside their position. He looked at Harry steadily. I will be fine. You hold the landing and you trust that. Harry stared at him. Then, come back. That's the plan? Sirius said, and touched Harry's shoulder once, and moved. The concealment ward along the front of Grimmauld Place was one of the oldest enchantments on the building, predating the Fidelius approach that the Order had later used in other locations. It didn't make you invisible exactly. It made you part of the architecture, your movement absorbed into the visual grammar of the building itself, so that watching eyes tracked past you the way they tracked past a downpipe or a window frame. It was extraordinarily subtle magic and required complete stillness of intention, no urgency, no spike of adrenaline, which was difficult when you were moving toward armed Death Eaters in the dark. Sirius had grown up practicing it, which was its own kind of black family childhood. He moved along the front of the building and around the corner into the alley, and he found them, 3 of them, exactly as Creature had said, clustered at the alley's midpoint in a configuration that said professional. These were not amateurs. They were positioned with overlapping fields of coverage, and they were patient, which was worse than aggression in some ways. He recognized one of them. Antonin Dolohov. Older than Sirius remembered, heavier, grayer at the jaw, but the bearing was unmistakable, and the wand grip was the same aggressive forward cant that Aura briefings had described 20 times. Dolohov had been in Azkaban too, for a while, and had apparently gotten out during the general disorder of the years after Voldemort's fall. He specialized in curse work that was specifically designed to evade shield charms. The other 2 Sirius didn't recognize by face, but their dark mark signatures were visible to the ward sight, pulsing in that particular arterial black that Death Eater enchantments carried. They were watching the front door. Sirius stepped out of the concealment ward 6 feet behind them and said, "Evening." All 3 spun. 3 wands up. Sirius had already cast. Not one spell, a rapid sequence, the kind of casting that the formwork in the garden had been building toward, a shield that was immediately redirected into a stunning hex, which split midair because Sirius had modified the casting to fork, both forks aimed at the 2 unfamiliar Death Eaters on either side of Dolohov. 1 hit. 1 was blocked. The blocked one ricocheted into the alley wall and sent up a spray of old brick. Dolohov cast something that was not a standard spell. The arc of it was wrong, purple and serpentine, and Sirius moved instead of shielding because you couldn't shield against Dolohov's specialty curses, you could only not be where they were going. The curse hit the wall behind him. "Black," Dolohov said, in a voice that was genuinely surprised. "You're dead." "Working on it," Sirius said, and cast again. Upstairs, Harry heard the alley explode into activity, the crack of spells, the sound of brick, Dolohov's voice, and he was on the landing with his wand already raised, watching the front door, covering his angle. Remus was in the garden. He'd heard Remus cast once, short and sharp, which meant the right wall had been tested and held. Then the front door blew inward. Not from outside. From the wards being overridden, someone had activated a secondary key, an older piece of black family magic that Sirius hadn't known was still in play, and the door came open with the force of magic that had been building pressure while their attention was on the alley. Classic misdirection. 3 outside to draw focus. 1 through the door. The figure who came through was masked and fast and cast immediately. A blasting curse aimed at the landing that Harry dodged by dropping sideways behind the railing. The curse took out a section of wall and brought down plaster and dust. Harry came up from behind the railing and cast. "Stupefy!" The figure blocked it, good reflexes, trained, and cast again, something lower to the ground that Harry felt rather than saw, a trip jinx combined with a binding, which was a layered cast that most 4th years couldn't manage. These were not ordinary Death Eaters. This was a surgical strike by people who knew what they were doing. Harry didn't panic. He'd been in situations that required fast thinking before, and his mind had the quality, the one Sirius had been shaping in the garden, of going clear when it needed to rather than loud. He tracked the masked figure's movement up the stairs, clocked the left shoulder drop that telegraphed their next attack, and when the next spell came he didn't shield it. He redirected it. The same way Sirius had shown him, the small wrist rotation that caught a spell at the edge of its arc and turned its momentum sideways. It was advanced magic, the kind that shouldn't work for a 13-year-old, but Harry's hands knew it because they'd practiced it until his body had stopped thinking about it, and the spell curved off into the hallway wall instead of into Harry's chest. The masked figure actually hesitated. Just a beat. Long enough. Harry cast 3 spells in rapid sequence. Expelliarmus! Impedimenta! Stupefy! And the third one connected, and the masked figure dropped to the stairs and slid 3 steps down before coming to rest. The silence lasted about 2 seconds. Then the alley outside went quiet too, in the specific way a space goes quiet after something definitive has happened. Sirius came through the front door 30 seconds later with the expression of a man who has just been in a fight and has come out the right side of it, and is still checking whether everything is real. He looked at the unconscious figure on the stairs. Looked at Harry, standing on the landing with his wand still raised. One inside, Harry said. I have no idea who it is. Sirius crossed to the figure and pulled off the mask. A face he half recognized, younger than the others, not much older than 20, the look of someone who'd been recruited recent enough that their face was still new to Ministry files. 2 down in the alley, Sirius said. Dolohov got away. He said it without particular frustration, the acknowledgement of a man who'd made calculations, and this was the acceptable result of them. He was always slippery. We'll have 3 to hand over to the Ministry. 3, Harry said. Remus caught one at the garden wall. Sirius looked up at him. You're all right? I'm fine. Harry lowered his wand. His hand was steady. He had good reflexes. Better than most Hogwarts students. He's not a student, Sirius said. These are trained people. Which means someone sent them specifically. He looked at the unconscious figure with the focused consideration of someone who has already moved past the event and into the analysis. They used an old Black family key. Someone with access to Black family property, or who had access, at some point, gave them that. The name Narcissa floated unspoken between them for a moment. It's not her, Harry said. Sirius looked at him. What makes you say that? She came to you voluntarily. She didn't have to. If she'd wanted to set you up, she had 2 weeks to do it with less evidence. Harry stepped over a piece of fallen plaster. And the key is old, you said it yourself? Before Walburga. That means it could be anyone who was in the house before Walburga died. He paused. Who had access? Half the old dark families, Sirius said. The Blacks hosted. Before the war, the Second War, before everything. He stood. I'll find out who it was. After the trial. Remus appeared from the back of the house with the 3rd Death Eater bound and floating in front of him, and he was wearing the expression of someone who had been in a fight and is now examining the experience for information, which was very Remus. He looked at the unconscious figure on the stairs. Looked at Harry. The expression shifted slightly. Good positioning, he said. Sirius told me to cover the angles, Harry said. You also redirected a spell, Remus said. That's not positioning, that's training, Harry said, with a small glance at Sirius. Creature appeared at the bottom of the stairs and surveyed the damage to the hallway and the unconscious Death Eater with an expression that had too many layers to parse completely, and then said, Creature will make tea, which was perhaps the most creature response possible to any situation. Make it strong, Sirius said. The Ministry arrived at 3:30, summoned by the ward alert that Good had set up with Amelia Bones's office specifically for this possibility. It was Bones herself who came, with 4 Aurors including Brightwell, and she looked at the 3 bound Death Eaters in the entrance hall, and then at Sirius, and then at the damage to the front door and the hallway wall, and her expression was that specific quality of controlled professional outrage that people develop when they've been in their job long enough to know exactly what they're looking at. Dolohov, Sirius said, handing her the identification he'd gotten from Good's files. And 2 others I don't have names for yet. They used an old Black family key to breach the outer wards. Dolohov escaped. Bones looked at the 2 unnamed Death Eaters. Her auras were already scanning them with identification spells. These are known operatives, she said. Both of them. We've had files on their dark mark signatures for 2 years. She looked at Sirius steadily. This was a targeted operation. Yes. Someone sent them for a specific purpose. She looked around the hall, at the scorch marks, the fallen plaster, the unconscious figures. Then at Harry, sitting on the stairs with a mug of tea that creature had apparently personally delivered. The trial is in 4 days. I'm aware, Sirius said. Someone wanted it not to happen, she said. Or wanted me not to be at it. He held her gaze. Which tells us who's paying attention to the trial and why. Bones was quiet for a moment. We'll take them in. Get statements tomorrow. Tonight you need to secure the house and rest. She paused at the door, Oris moving the prisoners past her. Lord Black. What happened tonight with these 3? This goes into the trial record. As context. Thank you, Amelia, Sirius said. She left without responding to the use of her first name, which was its own kind of response. They didn't sleep. There was too much to do. The wards needed checking and rebuilding where they'd been compromised, the front door needed to be reseated and rekeyed, the hallway damage needed at minimum a temporary repair so the house wasn't open to whatever came next. Remus and Sirius worked through it methodically while Harry assisted where he could and made up for where he couldn't with genuine practical help. By 5 in the morning, the house was as secure as it could be made on short notice. The door was reseated. The outer ward had been rebuilt with additional layers that Sirius pulled from Black family ward lore he'd memorized at 16 and not used since. The compromised key signature had been revoked from the house's magical recognition system, which required a blood invocation and a focused 20-minute working that left Sirius's wand hand aching. They ended up in the kitchen again, as they seemed to always end up in the kitchen, the 4 of them around the table in the pre-dawn quiet. Outside, London was beginning its slow early morning assembly. The sky above the garden wall was going from black to a deep blue. Harry had his hands around his mug and was looking at the table with the expression of someone processing several things simultaneously. Dolohov is going to Voldemort, he said. After tonight. Maybe, Sirius said. He got away. He knows where we are, he knows what the wards are like, he knows we're functional and not easy to hit. Harry looked up. He'll report all of that. And Voldemort will know the trial is happening and that we survived this and... He paused. The timeline is accelerating. Remus and Sirius looked at each other. He's right, Remus said. I know he's right, Sirius said. Then we don't wait for the trial to make the next move, Harry said. We use the trial to establish your standing and then we... He stopped. Reorganized. We need to be the ones choosing the timing, not reacting to it. Sirius looked at his godson, 13 years old, sitting in his ancestral kitchen at 5 in the morning, still carrying the evening's fight in the careful way he held his wand arm, talking about strategic timing and initiative in a war that hadn't officially started yet. Yes, Sirius said. That's exactly right. So what's the move? Harry asked. The trial, Sirius said. We win the trial. I get exonerated or at minimum the proceedings establish reasonable doubt that triggers ongoing investigation, which amounts to the same thing functionally. That gives us standing. Legal, political, public standing. He leaned on the table. Then we go to Dumbledore with full information, Peter, Voldemort's timeline, tonight, and we sit at the table as equals and we build the response together. Not inside his organization, not under his command. Alongside him. And the ministry? Remus asked. Bones is on our side in the way she's able to be, Sirius said. Fudge is manageable as long as the public position makes denying Voldemort's return politically untenable. Which it will be, if we play the information right. He looked at Harry. Which means you need to be visible. Harry raised an eyebrow. I'm very visible. I'm always very visible. Not as the boy who lived, Sirius said. As Harry Potter, ward of House Black, who fought off 3 Death Eaters in his own home at 2 a.m. at the age of 13 and is standing here 4 days before a Wizengamot trial looking like someone who is ready for whatever comes next. He held Harry's gaze. That's a different kind of visible. That's a message to every side that has a position in what's coming. Harry was quiet for a moment. Then, you want me to be, what, a statement? You're already a statement, Sirius said. You have been since you were 15 months old. The question is who controls what the statement says. He leaned forward slightly. Right now, the statement you send is, I am here, I am trained, I am protected, and the next person who comes for me or mine will not find the boy who lived. They'll find something considerably less comfortable. The kitchen was very still. Right, Harry said. He looked at his tea. Right. He looked up. You know they'll come again. Yes. Bigger. After the trial, or before, but bigger than 3. Yes. And you're not scared of that. Sirius looked at him. I'm smart about it, he said. Smart and scared are different things. You can do both. Harry nodded. Then, simply, we'll be ready. Yes, Sirius said. We will. The trial happened on a Tuesday, and it was everything a Wizengamot trial was supposed to be, theatrical, procedurally complex, and in the end, somewhat anticlimactic in the way that things are anticlimactic when the preparation has been thorough enough. The full Wizengamot chamber was packed. Not just with Wizengamot members. The gallery was full, observers from every significant wizarding family, ministry officials, press, and the particular quality of public attention that attaches to a story that has been building for 12 years and is now arriving at its first real destination. Sirius walked in wearing House Black formal robes and took his seat on the Wizengamot bench first, Lord of the House, Wizengamot member, claiming his seat before the trial proceedings even began, which was a legally correct move that also happened to be a significant statement about who he was in this room and what his status was. Harry sat in the gallery with Remus, visible and composed, and half the Wizengamot members who looked up at the gallery before proceedings began found their eyes held by a 13-year-old with green eyes and a calm expression and a scar, and whatever they'd been expecting, it wasn't quite that. Dumbledore was there. He sat in his chief warlock's chair and opened the proceedings with the ceremonial words, and when his eyes met Sirius's there was a long, complicated moment that had 12 years and 2 very different roads in it, and then the proceedings began, and they were colleagues. Good presented the case in 3 parts: the procedural wrongfulness of the imprisonment, the evidence regarding Pettigrew, and the events of 4 nights ago. Each part was clean, documented, and in places devastating, the Pettigrew section in particular, because the Marauder's map, presented as evidence and verified by Dumbledore himself as a genuine magical artifact of unquestionable accuracy, showed Peter Pettigrew's name moving through Hogwarts Castle for 12 consecutive years. It didn't prove his innocence by itself. But it combined with Remus's testimony, with the testimony of 2 Hogwarts staff members who had known Scabbers, with Dumbledore's own confirmation of the animagus identification he'd been prepared to conduct, and with the previous night's Death Eater attack, which Amelia Bones confirmed had involved known Voldemort-aligned operatives, to build something that was very difficult to argue against. The Ministry's representative tried. He was a different man from the preliminary hearing, better prepared, but the ground he was trying to hold had been extensively undermined before he arrived, and by the second hour his arguments were operating on increasingly narrow technical points that the assembled Wizengamot was visibly finding unconvincing. The vote, when it came, was not close. 41-7, with 7 abstentions. Sirius Orion Black, Lord of the Ancient and Noble House of Black, was acquitted of all charges. His imprisonment was formally recognized as wrongful. The ministry was directed to issue a public correction of the record, to compensate from the relevant seized assets, and to launch a formal investigation into the circumstances of the imprisonment, who had ordered it, who had known, and what system had failed catastrophically enough to lock an innocent man away for 12 years without a trial. Peter Pettigrew was formally designated a wanted fugitive on charges of the murder of 12 Muggles, conspiracy in the murder of James and Lily Potter, and 12 years as an unregistered animagus. When Ogden announced the verdict, the chamber was briefly, completely quiet. Then it was not. In the gallery, Remus put his face in his hands for exactly 4 seconds, and then composed himself. Harry watched Sirius rise from the Wizengamot bench, watched the moment when his godfather stood as a free man in a room full of people who had just, publicly, finally acknowledged what had been true for 12 years, and felt something in his own chest release that he hadn't realized had been held. Sirius looked up at the gallery, and found Harry immediately, the way he always found Harry immediately when it mattered, and the look between them was not triumphant. It was quieter than that. It was the look of two people who have been through something significant and are acknowledging, without ceremony, that they've come out the other side of it intact. Harry nodded. Sirius nodded back. Then the room was full of noise, and Good was at Sirius's elbow, and the press were on their feet, and Fudge was doing something politically expedient in the far corner of the chamber, and the world resumed its ordinary volume. They were back at Grimmauld Place by 7 that evening, and Dumbledore came with them. He sat at the kitchen table, in what Harry had come to privately think of as the guest chair, the one that wasn't anyone's specifically, and they talked. All 4 of them, for nearly 2 hours, and this time Dumbledore didn't arrange or direct or manage. He listened as much as he spoke, and when he spoke he provided the information he had rather than the information he decided they needed, and Sirius held him to that distinction twice when it mattered, and Dumbledore accepted the holding without apparent resentment. The picture that emerged was not comfortable. Voldemort was not gone. They'd all suspected this. Harry had known it for reasons that lived in his scar. Pettigrew was in the wind, moving towards something. There were Horcruxes, objects of dark magic that Dumbledore had been investigating, that bound Voldemort to life in ways that made conventional defeat impossible without understanding the full picture. Harry listened to all of it without flinching. Sirius listened with the particular attention of a man who is sorting information into operational and strategic categories in real time. Remus listened and occasionally asked questions that were quieter than Sirius's but precisely targeted. When Dumbledore finished, the kitchen was quiet for a moment. "The Horcruxes," Harry said. "How many?" "I believe 7, Dumbledore said. "Though I've confirmed fewer than that so far." "And you've been investigating this alone?" "Largely, yes." "That was a mistake," Harry said. Not angry. Not accusatory. Just clear. Dumbledore looked at him. "Yes," he said. "It was." "Then we help," Harry said. "All of us. Together." He looked at Sirius. "We build the team and we share the information, and nobody makes the important decisions alone." Sirius looked at Dumbledore. "That's the condition," he said. "Full information, shared decisions. If you can't work that way, I can work that way," Dumbledore said. He looked tired, genuinely, deeply tired in a way that suggested the performance of wisdom was expensive, and he'd been paying for it for a long time. "I'm not certain I'm naturally inclined toward it. But I can learn." Harry looked at the old man across the table. The headmaster who'd arranged his childhood from a distance, who'd made decisions about his life without his knowledge, who genuinely believed he was protecting him and had, in certain specific ways, failed. He looked at Dumbledore, and what he felt was not forgiveness exactly. That was a different and slower process, but something practical. Something that recognized that the man across the table was one of the most powerful and knowledgeable wizards alive, and that a war was coming, and that Harry had learned, in the past 2 weeks, that the people you work with don't have to be perfect to be worth working with. "Okay," Harry said. "Then we start now." Later, after Dumbledore had gone and Remus had gone up to bed, and the house had settled into its night-breathing quiet, Sirius and Harry were in the back garden. It had become their space, the place where the most honest versions of things happened. Harry had his wand out, not practicing, just holding it, looking at the sky above the garden walls where London's light made the stars faint but not invisible. "How do you feel?" Harry asked. Sirius looked at him. "Free," he said. "Actually free. Not just legally." He paused. "It's strange. 12 years of that being the thing I wanted, and now it's just, there. A fact. Good strange or bad strange?" "Good." He looked at the sky. "It'll take time to feel completely real. But good." Harry nodded. They were quiet for a moment. "The Horcruxes," Harry said. "One problem at a time," Sirius said. "I know. But," Harry looked at him, "you're not going to try to keep me out of it." "No," Sirius said. "Even though I'm 13. You're 13 and you redirected a Death Eater's spell in a dark hallway at 2 in the morning and then came downstairs and started talking about strategic timing." Sirius held his gaze. "I'm not going to insult you by pretending you're someone who needs to be protected from information." He paused. "I will make absolutely sure you're prepared before you're in any fight that's bigger than last night. That's different from keeping you out of it." Harry held his gaze. "And when Voldemort actually comes back?" "We'll be ready," Sirius said. "Both of us." "All of us," Harry said. "All of us," Sirius agreed. Harry raised his wand. "Expecto Patronum." The stag burst from his wand and filled the garden with silver light, larger than before, more certain, moving through the dark with the unhurried confidence of something that had earned its form. It walked to the far wall and turned and looked back at them, and its eyes caught the light, and it held that for a moment before dissolving slowly upward into the dark. Sirius watched it go. "Your dad would have loved this," he said. "I know," Harry said. He lowered his wand. The garden was dark again, but not the same dark as before. It had the quality of a dark that comes after light, which is a different thing entirely. The house was warm behind them. Inside, Creature was doing something in the kitchen that sounded like cleaning but might have been the house elf version of expressing contentment, which was barely distinguishable but real. The wards were strong. The trial was over. The record was corrected. Peter was still out there. Voldemort was still gathering. The war that was coming had not been stopped, only prepared for, and preparation was not the same as safety. But Harry Potter, ward of House Black, godson of Sirius Orion Black, son of James and Lily, the boy who had grown up in a cupboard and learned to fly and cast a Patronus in the shape of his father's animagus form, was not standing in a garden being afraid of what was coming. He was standing in his garden, in his home, beside the person who had fought through every legal mechanism in the wizarding world to claim him and meant every word of it, and he was as ready as 13 years of surviving the wrong life and 2 weeks of building the right one could make him. Which was, it turned out, considerably more ready than anyone who hadn't been paying attention would expect. The war would come. Harry Blackpotter would meet it. On his own terms. On his godfather's terms. On the terms of a house that had stood for 2 centuries and had finally, after all this time, found someone worth standing for. The garden was quiet. The stars were faint but there. The night went on. And in the morning, they would begin.